Hello everybody, we're going to start a little bit later than usual. We just ran into some weird tech problems, so just give it a moment. Okay, hello everybody. It is Friday night. It's a little bit more past 10. We had some technical issues, or at least I had some technical issues on my end. So we are going to get today's video started. Let's turn down this music here. Alright, so let's see. Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of Beyond the Doll. As always, I am your host, Shizusan, and my guest today, or my lovely assistant rather, is going to be Kano, my new girl. If you guys haven't seen my my new video that I posted of my unboxing of my A-Zone girl, this is her. She's here to grace us with her presence today. And yeah, she's just lovely. So today's episode is going to be a guest appearance episode, a very special episode, as we have someone here to speak with us, or to speak to us rather, regarding resin dolls. Now, for most of you that are familiar with my channel, I am mostly a collector of vinyl dolls, mainly Dolphy Dream, Smart Dolls, and recently A-Zone dolls. So yeah, I don't really mesh, not really, I shouldn't say mesh, but I don't really collect any resin dolls, at least not yet. I have some plans for the future to possibly collect some at some point, but I would like more information. And I know most of you that watch my channel probably are either new to resin dolls or don't even know what they are. I know some of you already do, but that's why we're having today's show, so that we can learn more about them, get you guys possibly interested in them, and where to buy, things to look out for, etc., things like that. So before we get started, let me introduce our guest for today. So she and I have known each other for quite some time, actually. We've met at many occasions in person and virtually, online, things of that nature. We are both avid collectors of ball jointed dolls. However, she has actually started her journey with resin dolls, and is very much so more familiar with it than I am. So let's turn it over to her, my lovely guest. Let me see if I could change the view here. Hold on one second. My lovely guest, Becca. So say hello, Becca, to everybody.
Hello. I have properly unmuted myself. I am pro at streaming.
It gets some getting used to, definitely, for sure.
I'm Becca. Usually I use the username Tempest Strife, but the problem I came into is that Tempest Strife is based on a character from my headcanon, which became my doll. So it's hard for me as a doll collector to have a username that's the same name as the doll that I own. So I just started saying, so on Den of Angels, it says Tempest_Strife, and it like allows you little flavor text underneath your username, and it says call me Becca. that's how I mitigated that problem. My helper today is Tempest, who is Delph Lishy, sculpted by Cerberus Project.
I've heard of that name before, Cerberus Project.
Ooh,
I think I've seen some like random tweets of Cerberus Project dolls that were out like prior, or some or statues or something. I just know that that
Yeah.
name is very familiar. I've heard it
I
before.
think I think they also do anime figures and
Hmm.
things like that because they are a sculpting group and not exactly Delft, but currently this is complicated. Currently I have a whole podcast episode on this. Currently Doll Fairyland is where the Cerberus Project sculpting group publishes their dolls.
Hmm.
I promise everything else I will say will be a lot less complicated than that subject, which was complicated enough that I needed to have a whole hour-long podcast for
Don't worry
just
about
that.
it. It's not a problem because we're gonna. That's why we're here. We're gonna delve into this whole resin thing, so at least people have an understanding of, what it is, what to look out for, things of that nature. But before we get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about us in general. I think the first time we actually met was probably at a con, but I'm
I
trying
think
to
I had
remember which one. It was Anime Next in Atlantic City.
that
Was
sounds
was that the first time?
maybe right because I think the first time we met, I went to one of your panels.
Hmm.
And I think you were having an anime dolls panel. And I'm like, okay, that
Yeah,
sounds like
yeah,
a doll person.
yeah. I think that's
And it's
what it
like,
was.
it's kind of that thing where like, I know about anime dolls, but like, um, it's like sometimes you just go to a panel, not because you want to receive the information in the panel, but because you know you're going to be in a room of people that care about the stuff they're talking about, which is going to
Right.
be your people.
Yeah, you're gonna have like mutual interest people,
Yeah, and then
basically.
even if you don't learn anything in the panel, everybody moseys out of the panel, hangs out in the hallway, and then like this stuff
Yep.
happens, and then
Yep.
like years later, this stuff is still happening. Hey,
It's surprising because I think yeah we met at an anime dolls panel that I was hosting, and then I believe the next year you were hosting a panel at the same convention,
I
and
think it
then we
was
ended up running
funny.
into each other hosting panels together at different conventions. We kept running into each other, so we have
I
like a
know,
long
and
history.
it was kind of funny because I one time like kind of I put in a panel and they were like, we're sorry, Shizusan, you can't have that panel this year. Somebody else is doing a doll panel." And you're like, "What the? Who else is doing a doll panel?" And you look and you're like, "Oh, it's Becca."
Yeah, I don't usually run into those types of issues because
Yeah.
there's not many doll panels around when you go to conventions. There's very few. And I know that there are some conventions that do feature doll stuff mostly. Like there's Doll North in Canada. And then NecoCon, which I was a guest at last year, they have their own small like a doll community down there, which was pretty cool also. So there
Yeah.
are some of them, but mostly I go to anime conventions to kind of spread the word of the dolls, and those
Yes.
conventions don't normally have anything doll related for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, like maybe a doll meet, maybe a doll meet.
Yeah, like a photo meet or something like that. Yeah.
Right. So, shall I tell my origin story? I don't think
Yes,
I've talked
please.
about it much. I was dying and searching for a picture of this one doll. I'm gonna put her down because, um, I don't have a stand right here, and she could sit here and just have her back to the camera, but that's not that interesting. And they're a mite bit heavier than the
Well,
actually
I
things
always, you
backwards.
know me, I always put my girls off to the side anyways, because it
Yeah,
gets your arms start to get tired, like holding them up.
yeah. That being said, I did put my entire collection behind me, which is fun. And if we have time at the end, I can take questions about any of
At least
the
you can,
sundry.
at least you can fit them behind you. I got no space back here. No
I know.
space.
I have a room. It's fancy. Such is the life of no kids and three cats. Um, it's a good life. So my origin story is I was very into Full Metal Alchemist,
Ooh.
and I was in a Full Metal Alchemist role playing group, and I was searching around for stuff, and I found this doll with an automail arm and an automail leg that was made to look like Edward Elric. Um, those in the doll community might know him as what's colloquially known as Automail Jerome, Jerome. Also, by the way, hi Jay Louisa. Uh, I I'm pretty sure that's the one of the same fans that has um, made comments and reviews and stuff for my podcast.
Oh, nice.
Um, so with this, I saw it and it was a very interesting doll because it was actually Jerome was a head sculpt made by the company Blue Fairy, but it wasn't Blue Fairy that published this doll. Now we get into the bit of the interesting stuff about resin in that it is easier uh, for the home artist to get into and recreate. So an artist, probably somewhere in South Korea, took the Jerome head, made a custom doll, made a custom arm and leg for it that were actually slightly shorter than the default arm and leg, which feels right for Ed because he'd kind of grow out of the leg and she'd have to, when we would have to adjust it longer. I love that little detail. It was probably unintentional, but I love that.
Hmm.
And made this doll, which then made me think, because I was role playing Alphonse Elric at the time. I'm like, what doll would make a good Alphonse Elric? And then I started going in through all that, and then um, so a slightly different version of her, but uh, it ended up that Lishi ended up being my first resin doll, my first Asian ball jointed doll. And that was
Okay.
kind of my intro story and how I got into Asian ball jointed dolls, which was also through anime. And instead of being drawn towards these official releases, I was being very drawn towards the custom and artist releases at the time.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's how I ended up here today.
Were there many when you started? Were there many like I guess anime inspired resin dolls at the time? Because I know even till today's standard, there isn't as many as in the vinyl scene, right?
You know, it's interesting because I think some of the original tie-ins, as I dig through, like I have years of notes.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the original Volks releases were both from for the resins and the vinyls. There was tie-ins for both of them.
I know Belle Dandy was one.
Yeah, so
Uh,
Bell Dandy was definitely later though.
oh, that was
Let's
later.
see. Chi, that's right. 2003, Dolls Party 9. Super Dolphy Chi was a tie-in. And that was just a few years into the doll hobby. I
Chi
see
from you say
notes.
Chi from Chobits, right? Oh my god, look at those notes.
Yeah.
I
um
didn't even know. Like I've seen Chi floating around, like in Twitter or Instagram posts or old forum posts, but I always thought that was a custom. I didn't know that was actually a Volks released uh,
yes,
resin
May
doll.
2003, May 5th, Dolls Party 9 Spring
Mm.
is when that one was released. And I believe that was the uh might not even been the first one. Let me see if there's anything else that was um mentioned here. Uh ooh, here's another one. Even earlier, the year 2000. It's not a series I'm familiar with, but they Dolls Party 4 in winter, they recreated the character Ian, Ian, from the comic Fujiruma Kan Raihuki
I
by
am not familiar with that
Kei
one.
Tome. Yeah, it's and my note on this, my notes here, which I think I took these notes in 2016. It says first anime slash manga tie-in question mark.
Hmm.
So I thought that might have been the first one, which was before before the first Dolphy Dream was
Yeah, I was gonna
released.
say that's a interesting time frame because I believe in 2000 or 2001 was the very first Dolphy Dream.
Yeah,
It's
I think
somewhere around that time frame.
so. Yeah. So that's it's very, very interesting that it was like kind of they kind of like started bouncing between them
Mm-hmm.
because the Volk sculpting group started not as a doll sculpting group, but as a hobbyist sculpting group for
Right.
garage kits,
Right.
essentially. So they jumped into this little doll thing, and the history of Volks is a whole other thing, which we could definitely go into. It would take way too long,
That
but
would take
suffice
a
to
whole nother episode to talk
yeah,
about the history of Volks.
yeah, no, and it's very interesting. But suffice to say that there's an origin story, just like, hey, the wife of the president of Volks goes,
Hmm.
"This is all great, but it's very male focused. We need a hobby for girls, and I want to be engaged in this
Right.
that my husband's business."
That's
And
my
so
understanding too. I think it was like the wife's idea at first.
yeah, and then one of the sculpting group brought in a doll, and she's like, "That's a great idea, and that's super cool. Let's do that." Of course, it was, let's see, 1997, even before all that. Dolphy was released.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is Dolphy. Dolphy is uh, ABS plastic vinyl head, usually rooted
Mm.
hair. This one I painted myself in my college years. It's okay. Can you tell I was into Full Metal Alchemist much?
Yeah, I see that emblem on there.
Yeah, I recreated the hoodie that I have in real life on this doll. I don't even know if you can see with the balance, but there's the red
It's a
blood
little hard to
seal.
see with the color balance. Yeah.
Yeah, but it anyway. So these guys were released in 1997, which is why from here we got the two offshoots, the Super Dolphy and then the Dolphy Dream.
Hmm.
But so from here there grew two, perhaps diverging, perhaps converging. We'll talk about that
Mm-hmm.
later. uh, Product lines
Hmm.
from Volks.
And then at some point in your collecting career, you went from resin and then introduced yourself into vinyl dolls. Can you kind of like let everybody know how that transition kind of worked out for you?
Yeah, so I was always curious about it, and one of my mentor sensei teachers from college that resides in Japan was getting more and more into the vinyl dolls as the years went on with his own collection, and which got me more and more curious, vicariously, of course. Um, I saw them. Danny Chu was getting big. I was getting curious about that. So I'm like, I'd like to maybe get one.
Hmm.
And of course, my teacher, the wonderful, enabling man that he is like, yeah, I got this like rescue doll. It has like glue and some stains and stuff. You want it? Uh, so I actually at the time, I did a trade for it and I sewed a really cool outfit that was like half inspired by traditional Japanese guard, half inspired by Star Wars Sith stuff. It was cool. And then traded that for a doll,
Hmm.
which actually was this girl that I eventually repainted. Her face was so stained in that I had to like invent a face up that I liked that would hide the stains.
Oh wow, I can't even tell.
And
I
in
can't even
fact, I
tell.
don't even know if you can tell on this camera, but in the style of like cover up, I had to like paint a little flesh tone there, almost like if you had like a blemish on your face and you used like a concealer.
Hmm.
I did that on a few spots on her head that you can probably see in person, but it might be hard to see on
To
the
see on the
camera.
camera, yeah.
But like, yeah, so she got repainted. I'm fairly proud of her.
She looks lovely.
Yeah, and on the inside of her head, you can see they went ham on that glue.
That's a lot of glue.
Yeah, I had
Surprisingly
to.
enough, it's not all around the eye though. It's just kind of on the
Uh,
bottom half.
it was originally. It was originally, and then I had to take the eyes out to repaint it and strip it and everything. So she went into the freezer for a little while. Poor darling.
Hmm.
No coat on, but it's okay. She survived. She's made of tough stuff. Uh, so yeah, that was her. And then I I share bodies because I'm a woman of limited space. So right now my paint job of the Crunchyroll Hime is using the body that
Mm,
that doll originally came on. So from there, I'm like, oh, internal frames are fun. You can like pose them and they stay posed and they don't like flop around and stuff.
right.
Pros and cons between resin and vinyl. More on that later. And I said, and you could, I didn't have any very feminine presenting dolls at the time. I had a small girl.
Hmm.
I had Tempest, and she's not a girly dress in like pretty clothes kind of person. So
Okay.
I finally had like a female presenting looking doll, and I'm like, oh, this is fun. So from there now, then I'm like, okay, one is good. I'll just swap out heads. It'll be fun. It won't take
Hmm.
up that much room. And then they're like, now presenting Near Automata, and I'm like, why'd you do this to me? Like I got the flyer in Japanese and I was on the phone with Lindsay, who's my co-host for the podcast I that is currently on hiatus called Ningyo Bingo. Um, and I was like on the phone translating the Japanese with her, going through it slowly, like trying to figure out all the details on this before they could even translate it to English. Because I'm like, I need to know what this doll is. I need to know all the details. They're finally doing like their merge, and then that was it. That was like the initial
Hmm.
doll that merged the aesthetics
Mm.
because it was the first time that uh super I'm sorry, Dolphy Dream could breathe through their noses, really. I mean, some other ones did,
Hmm.
but this one,
Yeah, 2B from Near Automata definitely had a very different face sculpt as compared to previous Dolphy Dreams that were released. She definitely had that more, I guess, to coin Danny Chu's word, like semi-realish
yeah.
type look to
Should I
her.
bring her over for example? Because
I
I
mean,
can
if
do
you
that.
have her, I mean,
I
you could
have
show her.
everybody.
You brought everybody with you? Oh my
I
goodness.
literally everybody.
Yeah. I remember you made, before 2B actually was released from Volks, I remember you made your own custom 2B.
Yeah, actually, that was very interesting too. Part of me as I get quieter as I walk away from the microphone. Reach, 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 don't knock anybody over. I believe in myself. Yes, victory. Okay, so I very much wanted this doll, and I was trying to convince myself that I didn't want an $880 like official licensed doll. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just get one. And on eBay, there was a place called Doll House that was a place in China that was making custom, like a kind of an outfit that was like a an outfit you could just throw on a Dolphy Dream or on a smart doll.
Hmm.
And so I did that, and it was nice. But then they showed her face, and I'm like, because when Volks usually does their announcements, they're like generic photo showing
Yeah.
no actual in process stuff, and I'm like, I don't really need it. I'll just get this $150 outfit or whatever. It comes with boots and the wig and everything. If I just buy boots alone, that's already like $50. That's worth it. Um, the outfit's a stain monster. Be warned. If you ever buy one, it is a stain monster. Put that thing right on a smart doll cortex if you can. It is a danger. But it had some inaccuracies. It was kind of okay. It's good to bring to conventions because you don't have to like have a heart attack about bringing a limited doll to conventions. But then I saw the pictures of her and her face, and I'm like, oh, actually, maybe I do.
It's
Maybe
kind
I
of
do
focusing
need
on
it.
her a little bit.
Yeah. Let me see. The problem is it sees my face and it wants to focus on me.
Yeah, these auto-focusing cameras, they make it
Yeah,
terrible sometimes when you want to show
it's
doll face.
like it wants to see my face, no
Mm-hmm.
face. I don't have a face. Look at this face. So yeah, so this is to be in a totally different wig, which makes her feel a lot like some of the original Volks dolls, which was let's see, Kira, Sarah, what was it? Kira, Sarah, Nana, and Megu. Yeah, they were all the same face sculpt,
Mm.
basically, but they just painted them in differently and put a different wig on them. which made them four different characters,
Mm.
which was kind of neat.
Yeah, she does kind of like in that short wig. She does look like kind of like a Hina doll in a way. She kind of
Yeah,
reminds me of like a Hina doll, to be honest. Like in that kind of get up in the wig, it looks
I
really
know.
nice.
I was like, I'm like, I keep teeter tottering. I'm like, do I really need to keep this doll? Or can I sell her? I know the anime is coming out. There might be some like increased hype with that.
There
And
probably will be.
yeah, and then I put her in, I finally got her eyes unstuck and posed them a little, and then I
Mm.
put her into this and the wig, and I'm just like, that's good though. I've also seen her get repainted in some marvelous ways.
And I
Um,
know that since your stint with doing Crunchyroll Hime, your 2B, and then you eventually moved into the realm of Smart Doll as well.
yeah, I'm currently in the process. Like, let's see, which corner? Yeah, that corner on the far edge. I don't. It might be just slightly out of
It might,
line.
yeah, it's a little out of view.
Of course, I forgot that didn't stick on. I'm currently in the process of painting a 2B out of a version 1 Genesis Chaos head.
That's a good one to start with.
Yeah, there's like, I have like 4 or 5 uh, face ups in progress,
Mm,
but I've always liked Genesis because, once again, kind of a melding of the two aesthetics. So it's a
right,
little closer to what I'm used to.
right. Which is what we're going to talk about later on in the show, actually, about merging the two, which is, I think, going to be a really interesting topic once we get there.
Yeah.
But
Oh, oh, could
as
we show
for
that
which one?
picture of all the Volks heads, like all the different ones?
Let me see. You want to bring that up now? Hold on.
Yeah, because I think it's
Let's see.
interesting to note that we're talking a little bit about Volks. Volks, uh, Resin dolls existed before Volks.
Here we go.
Um, there is a notable um, a notable German artist named Hans Bellmer, which did these famous kind of disembodied kind of things with the dolls that were more life size, that kind
Mm-hmm.
of pointed out like, it was kind of like creating a body but disembodying it and creating an object and then just making that object sexual as like commentary, which was really cool and interesting. But it wasn't until like, and there were some smaller artist dolls that did smaller things, but it wasn't until like the Volks group and the Zukimura group got together that the idea of an Asian ball jointed doll from a company that continually produces them in a standard line that sells it at a common shop became a thing.
Mm.
So Volks is what not necessarily introduced the idea of a ball jointed doll, but Volks introduced the concept of an Asian ball jointed doll as a consumer product,
Mm.
as the resin dolls. Um, so I think that's an interesting note. Oh, do we have some questions?
We have a couple
Uh,
people on. I didn't get to them yet because we were kind of doing intros, but we have Jay Louisa is in the chat. Yoshi Plays, hello. Yoshi Plays is in the chat. Venatic Free is also here. Gabrielle Camo, hello. My Ding
my,
Ding Dong is here. I always get a kick out of your name every time I see you attend.
my tra la la. And then Hypnotic Free, we'll be covering that question later.
Yeah,
Please
we'll be
look
talking about
forward to it.
staining a little bit later. We're kind of like just doing our own like little intro thing as of right now, but we will definitely get to that. So look forward
Yeah,
to that.
absolutely.
Um,
So,
but you said you wanted to talk a little bit about these heads first before we get started, I guess.
yeah, so initially, the ball jointed doll hobby was very geared towards the hobbyist because it came from Volks, which was a garage kit place.
Right.
So it was expected that the consumer would be the one finishing the product. So as you can see, it has the paint picture on the top, and this is a low resolution picture, probably because it came from a magazine from about the year 2000 or to 2003, somewhere around that time. Um, you see that on the top it has the pictures with the paint, which was shown by the company, but you would be getting and receiving the blank head with the expectation that the consumer would be finishing the product.
Right, because most people that were doing models or hobby kits back then, for those of you that don't know, like if you were to buy like a military plane or a car, they all came in just one color. You had to custom paint them yourselves. And Volks, being a hobbyist kind of company in the beginning, you know, it made sense that they only sold blank heads, and the hobbyists would have to do it themselves to create the actual look.
So from there, we start to get, as time goes on, you can see it a little bit in the Smart Doll land, and you get to see it a little bit in the Volks. Volks more in the resin. Smart Doll land used to be more of this, and they're kind of relinquishing a little now, where Volks then went to a policy of everything that they release that's resin, other than these head sculpts that they only release at like uh, lessons, painting lessons, shall
Hmm.
be a finished product, and
Hmm.
they will people only ever see finished, completed projects from this company, so they can never see a bad example, or very seldom see a bad example of paint on their doll. Almost kind of similar to what happened with Danny Chu, where he at first never released unpainted anything or even separate heads. That's
Mm-hmm.
new within the last two
Oh
weeks,
yeah.
like brand new. Like I can smell the resin new, or vinyl in your case. Um, yeah, it's been interesting seeing the we're diverging and converging through different like ways of these hobbies going,
Right.
which is really
It's
interesting.
it's just a wave of a trend, just like anything else. Like with fashion trends, how you know you have bell bottoms, and then bell bottoms leave, and then bell bottoms come back. It's kind of like the same thing with the doll hobby as well. Some things start one way, they take another path, and then somewhere down the road they come back actually, because
Yeah.
either demand or what's going on with supply and demand or logistics or whatever. But things always seem to make their turnaround at some point.
Yeah, I think at this point we're good to return to the normal order, normal
Okay,
speaking
so
order of
we're
the
gonna go.
slides.
We're gonna start from the beginning. So, uh, like I said, this is going to be about resin dolls today, and we kind of went back and forth between intros and resin dolls, like as we were talking. As normally Becca knows that I ramble a lot, and she
Um,
seems to like have the same quality that I do. So
I'm
we
sorry.
both are
We
guilty of it.
we're
So
both guilty of this. There used to be this thing called 3 Minute Thursdays.
yeah, there used to be a thing.
But then Shizusan looked deep within his soul and said, "That's not really me. That's just the me that I put up on YouTube. Let me show you the real me." 3 hours later.
Yeah, I know, right? I have such long videos. So I want to show you guys some quick examples of what we mean. So for most of you that are watching this video either live or at some later point in time, if you follow my channel regularly, like I said before, I'm usually Dolphy Dream, Smart Doll, A Zone, and they're usually anime inspired dolls, all made out of vinyl. So for today's topic, it's resin dolls that Becca will help us with. And to give you an example what they look like, I pulled a random picture of one of the standard model dolls from Volks, just to give you an idea of, at least aesthetically, like look wise, what a resin doll would be like. So this is the first one. Her name is Mai, and she is a regular, I believe, a regular SD for Super Dolphy Girl.
Yes.
Um, and that's basically what they look like. They have different features than you would with an anime doll. You could definitely tell with the nose, the eyes, and the lips. It's very different than anything in vinyl,
As Danny Chu
except
would say, they can pick their nose.
yeah, except for
They
the
can dig
fact
for
that
gold.
they kind of have this look of semi-real dolls from Smart Doll, which, to be fair, this came first. So these type of
Yeah.
dolls came first. This aesthetic came first before Danny Chu ever started making the semi-real version of the girls. Um, and then to give you some other examples of what they also do with resin is a recent release was the Frozen Girls for Elsa and Anna. This was a collaborated dolls rather from Volks in doing, a licensed product. Volks has a history of doing licensed products with resin dolls just as much as they do with Dolphy Dreams as well. And the more recent iterations would be Anna and Elsa. And you can also tell from their facial features and expressions, it's a different kind of look than you normally would see in your typical Dolphy Dream or Smart Doll kind of look. Some other examples, which I thought was just really fun just to touch upon, is this one here. This is a male resin doll, also from Volks, and he is actually a recreation of a very famous samurai named Date Masamune. The reason why I picked this one is just it's a personal fan favorite. At some point, maybe I will get my hands on this doll when I decide to delve into the resin world. He definitely looks really cool to me. I like his look, and I don't, as of right now, I don't have a male doll. But these are just examples that I just want to show you of what resin dolls do look like in comparison to something that you would see in vinyl.
On a brief tangent, if anyone doesn't really know about the historical context of Date Masamune, I would highly recommend this little Netflix series. Oh my gosh, I wish I could remember the name right now. But there's a Netflix series that's like a little 2 or 3 part series on like the history of Japan, and it does like reenactments with actors and stuff like
Is
that.
that the one? It's I think it's called Japan Warriors or something like that, where it starts out with Oda Nobunaga, and then it goes
Yeah.
through like a whole history progression. Yeah, I saw that one.
And
It's a very good documentary if you guys are interested in samurai stuff.
and it actually about 2 of the professors, two of the doctorates that are on there taught me when I was in Japan, and one of those
Oh,
doctorates is the one that enabled me to get that to get my first Dolphy Dream.
that's
It's a
really
small
interesting.
world, right?
That's really interesting to learn. I never would have thought like one of those guys in the documentaries was actually a Dolphy Dream collector or resin
Absolutely.
doll collector.
Absolutely. We're everywhere. We're under the carpet. We're hiding in your closet. You can't escape us. They're
So
everywhere.
for the next part, we are gonna actually, now that you guys have like a quick sneak peek of what these resin dolls look like between the female dolls here, or like a small example of the male dolls that you could see here, Becca's gonna take away the next segment and actually introduce you guys what is a resin doll, like what goes into it, everything that's a part of it. So let me just change screens here so people can see, and you can take it away.
Okay. So for those of you who were here last week, you're ahead of the game. Let's talk about the material. Vinyl, obviously, squishy, pliable, stainable. Resin, hard, non-pliable, hard to stain. Not impossible, just hard. Um, because of this, um, it's harder to kind of get a frame on the inside of there because as you've seen if you've looked at any video, sometimes you have to like heat up the vinyl to get things through there and everything.
Hmm.
And not to mention ball jointed dolls. There's a long history of ball jointed dolls, all going back to like composite dolls from Germany and things like that. And what we're talking really is contemporary Asian ball jointed dolls. Way back that when instead of elastic, because elastic didn't exist until semi-contemporary times, they would use string. They would attach string to a spring and then that spring to a hook, and that would create your tension for your doll. Instead, what we're using is the same concept as the old composite dolls, which used to be you would have your mold, you would pack your composite material around the mold, which would create a hollow interior, and then you would string it through, and then you'd use those springs for tension. In our case, we use elastic for tension.
Let me just switch screens so they could see that elastic a little bit better.
So here's the elastic that we would use for tension. So depending on the size of your doll, you will have different size elastic. Let's see here.
Right, so for those of you watching, there is no internal skeleton in these
There
dolls.
is. So this guy as I pull them out, has very tiny little elastic. And if I go tinier, stay, you know you want it. Good. Has even tinier, 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 itty bitty elastic.
Right, and essentially rubber bands.
Yes, they're almost always still covered in a fabric or like a threading to kind of prevent it from gripping onto the
Oh, right.
just so when it's posing,
Mm-hmm.
it'll do it smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
But what you essentially get is a big fancy beaded bracelet, except instead of a beaded bracelet, it's a doll that you string through. You can probably already see that there's some problems with this. What we're looking at in this photo is one of the oh my god, Lucis. I'm trying to Quinoa Lucis. Unoa, sorry. And that was at the point where it was usually a single joint. That was one of the first dolls that I can think of, notably, that had a faceplate, which was very cool. But there's not much in the realm of in the doll that would like keep poses between the extremes.
Mm-hmm.
For keeping the poses in the extremes, you're reliant upon the forces of physics.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you're working with tension and friction. For more, please see my podcast episode, Joints, Friction, and Function. So you're playing this game against the friction of the two ball joints together, the tension, which increases that friction, and how much that wants to play against each other. And then in addition, you're playing with this little game over if it's an elastic and it's going through a hollow body. Elastic always wants to be at rest. It wants to be at its shortest length. So if when they engineered the doll, the shortest length is with the leg bent, there is going to be at some point, someday, when you are putting on your doll's shoe and it's just going to kick you in the face. Delphs from the year 2005 or something like that are notable for having this problem. To assemble the dolls, this is like what you can use officially, where you would string the elastic through, put it through the little hook right there, and use that to pull it through the doll, keeping it at tension, once again, like a little beaded bracelet. And on the end, you would hook it through. Just like, da-da-da. I have so many pieces just hanging around me. It's magical.
Well, it's great for the viewers because they can actually see it.
Just like here. So on the top here, there's like a little loop, a metal loop, because it's got to be metal. And it actually is cast right into the resin. If you put too much tension on your doll, if you string that elastic too tight, you can, and I have heard of people ripping that hook right out of the foot or right out of the hand or right out of the head. So not over tensioning your doll is important.
Right.
So there's like usually like a little S hook that'll link right into there and help you out with that.
So would you say it's more so like trial and error when you're putting the doll together with the elastic, whether or not you make the elastic too tight or too loose? Because if it's too loose, the doll would just kind of collapse on itself, right? And then if it's too tight, it might actually just combust.
Yeah, if you're too tight, I can almost actually show you here. Like the doll always wants to end up being in the least. You can see how that arm just wants to snap into place right there. There is no rest in between. There's not enough friction to overcome it. That is the shortest length for that for that elastic to be. And that's what you'll notice, that your doll will just kind of go like a praying mantis, almost going like,
Hmm.
my arms are here. And no amount that you unpose my arm will make me want to overcome that tension that makes me want
Hmm.
to go back to that shortest length of elastic. Um, so that's kind of what happens. This is an example of some of the tiniest dollies. Um, they're fun. This is
That is so small.
yeah, both this one and this one. This one's perhaps prettier because instead of my silly face up, it has the company's face up. Um, this is a Pookie Pookie, which is again by the sculpting group Cerberus Project, and from the website the doll Fairyland.
Hmm.
So so tiny. Um, there's things you can do to increase your friction. It used to be called sueding, which was very close to what you used to do on antique ball jointed dolls, which was literally to put a very thin piece of suede pilver derived from an animal, a type of leather, and actually put it in there, almost like your suede shoes that you just saw on your brand new, wonderful uh, YouTube video showing
Oh,
your
the Azon
lovely
doll?
new.
I
Yeah. So if you can imagine that texture that's
think I have
on
it
your
here.
shoe, and when you rub
This
that, it
one.
kind of has a bit of texture to it, right? So that would increase that friction as the joint rubs against it. So people saw that, then they started using like moleskin, which is already pretty sticky on one side, so you didn't have to glue it. Then people were like, well, hot glue is kind of sticky enough already, and then they just put a very thin layer of hot glue around the joint, let it dry, and
Hmm.
then it was almost like a rubber. And then even Volk started getting in on it and saying, we'll just release these little silicone discs, and in between your bead joints, your doll beads, you'll put one little silicone washer, and that will increase your friction. Well, it does, but it also increases the space between the beads, which may or may not be to your aesthetic liking. Plus,
Hmm.
occasionally it likes to catch on the elastic.
Oh, it could
Um,
get caught.
it catches on the elastic, and then as it's returning um, between poses, it sometimes just gets eaten on the inside of the bead of the leg or
Hmm.
whatever it might be.
Hmm.
So it's the simplest and easiest one to add to your doll, but it's also, I would say, possibly somewhat the least aesthetically pleasing if it creates too much space, and perhaps annoying if it just goes and
Hmm.
your doll's internal cavity eats it.
Right. So with these resin dolls, because they don't have an internal skeleton and they're essentially held together with this gigantic rubber band, um, they can't stand on their own 2 feet, much like vinyl dolls can they? Do they need a stand, or can they actually stand on their own?
They can stand on their own, and part of what can make it better or worse is what doll, what generation, what company.
Mm-hmm.
I think I sent one image to you that actually showed uh, what can they can do in the harder resins is create locking points. Originally, when Volks first put out their dolls, the the joints were just complete spheres.
Mm-hmm.
There was no stopping point. It was, I am sphere now. Every single point of here rests the same and has equal liking in this joint. Then they started to make it a little bit more egg shaped, in which case it had, I like this point and I like this point. So it was like, I like to stand and I like to sit.
Okay.
Then,
So the curvature of the joints kind of gave it a place where it can actually rest.
right. Then
Okay.
they added in little ledges. I can't quite show you without depantsing the man, which has other issues because there's this famous uh, uh, article I have saved on my computer, which is aptly named "These Dolls Have Dicks." That is an actual article that was published by an actual magazine. I think it was by in the magazine Misbehave. Um, and they do in fact have genitalia sculpted on most of the resin dolls. It comes from the nature of them being somewhat derived from a culture of the artist dolls.
Hmm.
And somehow it got there as opposed to the vinyl, in which case it was harder to make the deeper recesses and things anyway. So you lost a lot of little details and you had little thin lines. Anyway, longer story, I'm going to ramble. But I'm going to try to show you this as best as you can. But here, there's like a little ledge in here where it locks into the crevice of his bum. So it'll want to just go, boop, I'm in the sitting position now. There we go. And he'll want to sit. Similarly, in the front, now not on this one, some of the newer ones, on the front of the ball joint, there can be a little ledge on the front, which on the front of the torso can go joink. And just that little ledge of it goes catch right before. So as you go between the two poses, you kind of have to uncatch from the ledge and then uncatch from the ledge, which helps create a lot of additional stability for the doll. This one's a Volks. This one is, what is it, SDF 29. It's a discontinued full choice system head from Volks. Yeah. It's one of the interesting ones that had interchangeable ears because
Interchangeable ears. Wow.
Yeah.
We don't have that for vinyl dolls. That's for sure.
No. And actually, Volks kind of did away with it, but it's
I guess we do if you count the elf ears, I suppose.
Yeah, these ones are interesting. They used to do it in a different manner, but she doesn't have the locking points, so she always just wants to go bloop.
Flop in different ways.
Yes, she does, which is definitely a downside.
Okay. So with resin dolls, I mean, depending on the doll company or how they make it, they can, I guess, hold their poses and stand on their own. But it's probably, I mean, the same thing with vinyl dolls. It's probably the same thing where it'd be nice just to have a stand anyways for that extra added comfort, I suppose.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially since the average resin doll is gonna weigh 2 to 3 times the amount of your.
Is that an elf ear?
It is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's an elf ear. Your average vinyl doll, as you can tell, they're a lot more solid. There's a lot more mass to them. So there's a lot more weight to it that needs to be held up. So that creates some problems. Because it's more weight to hold up. So if it starts to fall, mass times acceleration equals force. And let me tell you, actually, I'm in the perfect spot. The difference between a resin doll when it drops and a vinyl doll when it drops is that vinyl is kind of like one of those gooey covers, like bouncy covers around your cell phone.
Oh yeah, like a cell phone cover case that has like shock or something in it, like to protect the phone.
Absolutely, which is why when your doll drops, usually the frame doesn't break because you have this wonderful vinyl that just acted as your what do you call it, car bag. And,
like an airbag kind of thing.
Yeah, like an airbag. It absorbed the force. Meanwhile, see that missing finger?
The pinky?
It's gone.
Yeah, the pinky's gone.
Yeah. So that's what happens. Sheer force can flatten, break pieces off of a resin doll, especially fingers, ears, especially elf ears, especially the ones that are not detachable, are especially susceptible to this when they fall. So I definitely recommend, if you're going to a doll meet, to either bring a doll stand with you or just plan on having them sit, because then there's only so far they can accelerate with their mass that they don't hit terminal velocity.
Right, when they fall over on the table or whatever.
which I believe is 28 feet per second per second, because of the resistance of the airflow. That's why that's the terminal velocity. You can't get faster than that because the friction of air. Yeah, so you don't want to hit terminal velocity with a ball jointed doll because it'll just done. Now, I've had plenty of them take face plants from tables and stuff and been okay. Maybe one just got like a dent on the nose. Maybe one lost a finger. And then if you can find it, you can glue it back on, ideally, especially if you pin it and glue it. But yeah, that's definitely one of the downsides. They're heavier. They can break, straight up break. Just like vinyl, if you put them in a hot enough car, they will lose their shape. Resin is closer to a plastic than it is a ceramic.
And I know you mentioned it earlier in the stream. You were talking about how the resin is hard and it's not like malleable, like it can't bend or anything like that. So, being somebody that doesn't collect resin is not really familiar with it. It's kind of delicate, but kind of not. Like it is harder, but it's not as delicate as, let's say, a porcelain doll kind of thing. But it's a little bit more robust than that. But it can still, essentially, when you're talking about that terminal velocity, like if it fell at a certain point, it can shatter.
It would more be like a shear force single point break.
Okay. So it could like break in half, but not into many pieces.
Yeah, it'll be more like when so like if you break a glass, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be like shatter. Ceramic is more like breaking a dish where it's like a couple of pieces. This is almost like more like a very, very, very hard plastic where if you broke it, it would just kind of go. I had hit my shear point and it is here. And it'll usually just have one breaking point. I saw some questions in the chat regarding the elastic. How durable is the elastic? Durability of the elastic is dependent upon how thick it is. How thick it is depends on which doll you're stringing it with. The more mass the doll has, the more force you have to overcome. So it's pretty darn durable. It gets weaker if you make it wet. So if you ever did a photo shoot in the water or in the rain, I'd recommend probably planning on changing out that elastic, which brought another question. Do you have to change it every few years? And how much resistance does it give to the joints of the doll? You do have to eventually change the elastic, just like if you have, if you're like me, maybe Shizusan and maybe a few others in chats, if you have like some Pokemon cards you've had since the 90s and they have like a rubber band around it, rubber band.
That rubber band, yeah.
It just eventually rot out. It'll lose its tension.
I don't even know what the word for it is. It just disintegrates over time, or
it dry rots.
It dry rots. There you go. It dry rots.
So it loses its moisture. It's what keeps it together. And I think there is stuff you can give for rubber that rehydrates it. But honestly, with the strings, just replace the strings.
Now, when you replace them, I can just imagine. In my own head, I'm just imagining things like if you're replacing the elastics within this resin doll, depending on what elastic you get, it may be hard to restring, right? You need some kind of, I guess,
requires a bit of tension.
Elbow muscle to like pull it through into the joints and things like that.
So my typical method before I got that string puller was to string actually what do you call it? Bit of ribbon through the loop. So I'd have a loop on a loop, and then I would thread that through the beads.
Oh, okay.
And then if you can imagine me, I'm a little person. I don't have a lot of torque, and you don't want to press that resin against something hard. So it usually goes like my foot's here, my hand's here, and I'm pulling here. And then I got it to the right spot, and then, all right, here's my hemostats. All right, unlock these, put that there, and okay. I can release the tension. Then I come in with my hooked foot, hook it in, release my hemostat, and let it go in. Um,
Hmm.
it's a little easier than that, and it's also easier if you have two people. The
Hmm.
smaller the doll, the less the tension. Just makes it easier. Um, One thing also that you can do to kind of help with those in between poses is you can wire the doll. Once again, the depending on the size of the doll, you'll need a thicker or a thinner wire,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll help you with in between poses. Because, like I said, your ball joint will usually want to be at one of the extremes because that's probably going to be the shortest point of the elastic.
Would you use that wire inside, like wrap it around the elastic, or how would you kind of integrate that wire with the elastic in there?
I wonder if you guys can see her. I'm sorry, lady.
Let me
Everybody's getting
change the
pulled
view.
apart today. So I got elastic, elastic, and right next to it, right here, is the wire.
Oh,
So
okay.
with this, with her arm like this, it's a single piece of wire. So sometimes when I move this arm, the other arm will want to move a little. But with this, I can put her here, 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 here. This is a single joint doll. So she doesn't have
Hmm.
double joints. So she doesn't want to go further than that. But that'll help greatly with her posing. It also helps greatly with her knees, which want to very much kick. You can see right here, I'm putting this leg here. It wants to go there
Oh yeah, I see it
because
moving forward.
that is the shortest length of elastic. um, some things people do for increasing the stability of the dolls, similar to your A zone that you just saw, is they install a double joint. Hey, buddy.
Right. For those that didn't watch, I have a new unboxing video of an A-Zone doll, and it's my very first A-Zone doll, and they have different joints than Smart Dolls and Dolphy Dreams, where there's a double joint in order to make the straight arm pose go all the way and bend like this with no real issues. So you're saying that the resins also have something akin to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And uh, why did I choose the one with actual buttons? All right. I'm like, why do you have buttons and not snaps? Why is this so high quality on the moment where I want it to be lower quality? Oh, but it has snaps around the wrists. At least it took pity on me there. Also, take note, black gloves, no stains.
Ooh.
No stains. It's pretty hard, but not impossible, to stain a resin doll. All right, so this guy is my favorite system of double joint, but it doesn't actually give full motion. So with the wire I put in him, he will easily hold this pose with that arm right there. And they added this little cup joint,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of partially covers this as it comes over and creates a double joint. Otherwise, a lot of the joints that you see, even the Volks ones, are what I call the Lincoln log joints. Um, let's see, I might actually focus better if I put it on a black background. Um, and uh, what will happen is it'll be like straight joint comes down and then comes in.
Hmm.
So almost closer to what you have on your A zone. Um, and those are okay, but I like the aesthetic of this, which was sculpted once again by Cerberus Project. Can you tell I have a preference? My resins are mainly Cerberus Project sculpted items and Volks sculpted items. Um,
Keep going. I'm just dealing with this spam. We're getting spam into our live chat here.
oh well, I think maybe they're here to see uh my ding ding dong. I don't know. uh so there is that. Dressing the dolls. Different dolls have different things to help out with that, but you can see here that this elastic pulls out and there's a little hook right there, right here. hooks
Okay.
onto that elastic. And he wants the face plant because, once again, that's the shortest path. That being said, there's all sorts of lovely little details, which I'm probably not going to get with this lighting, unfortunately, but I can shade him. Uh, there's all sorts of lovely little details in the sculpt that are harder to get with vinyl. Vinyl's hard to get deeper crevices because of the nature of it spinning
Mm-hmm.
around. It's harder to. Here we go, buddy. You're getting everything taken off today. It's harder to get separation between the ear and the head because then you would have a little cavity in this the spinning uh, form for the vinyl that would have to be consistently filled in every time that you made that mold as it was spinning, and hopefully not spin the material back out again. So you can have little pieces that are hanging out, noses that are more protruding, and things like that. That's a lot more detail that you can get without needing a lot of
Mm-hmm.
advanced skill on mold making and everything for the vinyl.
Right. And I think Danny even himself, because he's the one that usually posts a lot of these things. So we don't normally get things like this from Volks or anything like that. But he's made a lot of mention about when he makes new dolls, he has to print it in a 3D printer to get like the look, and then try to make the mold. But then the mold doesn't always come out right, and it's just like this long process of trying to get the vinyl to settle to make the actual face and the protrusions of the nose and the lips and everything that he wants it to be. Whereas I suppose with resin, because in a way you're essentially just sculpting it and chiseling it out, I guess you can make it more defined. um
So typically with resin, you'll have a silicone mold. I'll show you that in a moment. Um, so heads are typically strung through, and that tension, usually there's either one band that kind of loops or two looping bands that goes from leg to leg,
mm-hmm.
top to bottom. Once again, Cerberus Project made our lives easy, and they created a little key system that just turns, and then you can pop the head off. Aha,
Ah.
easy. As opposed to the Volks ones. Beheaded doll. Sorry. You didn't know you were coming into this live stream for body horror. So that little key system allows you to take it on and off pretty easily. Um, Typically on the inside of the head, you'll have sculpt information. Sometimes it'll also have information present. Let me see if I can shade the light
Oh, on
on
the
the
on the head
inside of the
inside
head
of the head
cap.
cap, yeah.
And this one is designed so it's a keyed mechanisms. Some of the earliest ones actually had the tension go all the way through, and the head was actually the last point, and the hook would go through here, and that hook would pull from the head cap all the way down
Mm.
to the feet.
And that would kind of keep the head cap on the head as well by doing it like that.
Yeah, but it also made it a lot harder to change out. If you put on a shirt that was too tight, you couldn't take on and off the head that easily. Especially with these dolls, which typically have glued on eyelashes. Not always for the boys, but typically for the girls. At least the upper lashes will be glued on, lower lashes will be painted. It's the typical style. There is variations on everything because we are artists and we express ourselves how we choose. But the resin, as I mentioned last time, is a two-part polymer plastic that goes together and then has an exothermic reaction, which means you must have a mold that can withstand that heat. Usually that's a silicone mold. This is a silicone mold that I have created of my own creation. Comes from a two-part silicone putty that can actually withstand some heat. So you would take your master, you'd put it into the mold. It may or may not actually destroy the original master. And then there is so many uses of that mold you can have before it degrades. Um, so with that, you use that mold over and over again, and it's more like this. You would then pour it into a pour point. It would come down. It would have an exothermic reaction. It would get very hot, and then it would cool down and create your doll.
Hmm.
And then you would go through finishing, sanding, painting, etc. Um, Now there's, as you can see, I have created this mold myself for something, which I'll discuss in a moment as we talk about where to buy these things.
Yeah, before we get into that, a couple more things I want to hit
Yeah,
some points
absolutely.
on is with this picture here that we show. So, would you say that when individuals get into the hobby for resin dolls, are they like vinyl in the sense that when you purchase them, they come assembled, or would they come like this in pieces that you would have to assemble the resin doll yourself?
What you're seeing is the Unoa, and that was very close to the beginning of the hobby.
Okay.
It was actually one of the sculptors that used to, I think, work for Volks that made those dolls. Um, and with that, kits were the thing then. We have now evolved into pre-assembled, pre-done ones. And I will say there is about uh, three main different styles of purchasing a doll now that's typical.
Hmm.
Kits are not typical.
Okay, so something
One,
like this picture is not something you would run into nowadays.
not currently typical.
Hmm.
What is typical is what's called a basic doll. A basic doll might come with eyes, nothing else. Completely blank, no paint, no hair, no clothes, has the elastic, is strung together, but will come with you blank.
Hmm.
Typically for a fee that you would pay to the company for about anywhere from 50 to $70 by my 70, 80 US dollars by my recent research this week. You can increase your basic doll to also have a company face up. Okay, so that's style one. You will still have to put out money to get your own wig, your own clothes.
Hmm.
And in this way, this is really continuing with the idea that you can customize an idea of a blank doll to what you want it to be. Style two is what's called a full set. Typically, to increase interest and also to just make things more interesting and things like that for releases, when a new sculpt is released for a lot of these companies, it'll first be released as a full set and later just be released as a normal basic. But to get that full set, the full set is limited. So the outfit and the way the face is painted, and perhaps some extra pieces that come with the doll, will all be limited time only that amount for that run. But later, you can just get the doll as basic, which is unpainted or maybe just the company face up
Hmm.
for a lesser price.
Hmm.
Average increase between a basic and a full set is around $200 to $300, depending on how many pieces you're getting with it.
Okay.
Typically, your full set will have a full face up, wig, eyes, uh, outfit, shoes, dress top to bottom, ready to display, ready to play with. Um, so that's way number two. Way number three is what we're seeing right now on the screen, which is there is, in fact, tie-ins for resin dolls. Anywhere from these ones from Volks to there's also been tie-ins for Rose and Maiden, Attack on Titan,
Hmm.
um, let's see, Black Butler, all from different companies. Um, so that's very fun and interesting. So then you'll have that, and of course, those tend to be depending on how many pieces it comes with. It can either be like on par with a full set, or a little bit more expensive because you figure they have to pay everything that you would have to pay to make the stuff for the full set if it's on par. But if this one also has to pay the licensing fee, to the company, they got to charge a little bit more and pass that on to the consumer. So that's the three ways. So it'll be your basics, your full sets, and the occasional uh, merchandise property tie-in.
Yeah, I think the Attack on Titan, I saw that before. I think it's Levi.
Yes.
I think they have a Levi one. I just found it. Let me see if I could show it to you guys real quick.
It's really cool. He has very like pronounced, like they made his serious face so serious. They really made his brows pronounced.
So if you guys can see that, there's the face real quick of Levi from Attack on Titan. And there's a, I guess you waist belt, cravat, jacket, cloak, long boots, blade. Oh, you even have the device that allows them to like swing around. That's him in full gear. So there's all different kinds of resin dolls too.
Jay Louisa made a good point that there's a couple of artist makers that do sometimes have kits. I know Logan Doll has some of those for their smaller sculpts. Absolutely. So artist dolls deserve their own 3 whole hours. Artist dolls are typically made by 1 to 3 man teams within a household. Please, and mind you, resin has bad gases. Please see previous episode where we talked about 3D printing. All the same safety precautions that hold to the 3D printing in resin.
Yeah, chemicals and fumes.
Hold here.
Right.
Yeah. So artists will be doing this, and these artists will create design either physically or within a sculpting program, either an AutoCAD or a full-on digital sculpting program.
Right.
And then have a mold created and everything, which is really great and cool. But while you and I know that like Danny and Volks have relatively, they're small teams, but they're still like a company. These artist dolls are typically like 1, 2, 3 people. Like it would be like if myself and my husband were like, okay, we're gonna make 20 of this doll, and then maybe make it on demand until either my master dies and I can no longer make molds anymore, or until my mold dies and then that's it. So artist dolls are a beautiful, huge, wonderful world that I haven't even touched on. This kitty cat is a wonderful artist doll that I got. It has a little bit of the snapping problem where it always wants to go to the shortest path on the limbs. So I got to get some nice tiny what do you call it, wire for this guy, who I painted to look like my kitty. And then I actually have one other artist doll piece, which they were selling as a scrapper so people could use them for face-ups. This is maybe a little weird because the one eye is out, but pay no mind to that. But here's one I was practicing some rainbow fun face-ups on, and I did a terrible job with the eyebrows, but who cares. And you can see still has some of the Flash dolls on it. And this was, I actually wrote on it, this is Sweet Dolls Alice. Sweet Dolls Alice.
Oh, so that was like the base that you started with, right?
Yeah. Okay. So another artist doll that I actually got to meet in person, and on my podcast Ningyo Bingo, there was actually a series of when I went to Doll Acon in Texas at the anime convention there. I got to interview a whole series of artists and what they do, and it was really amazing. So I highly recommend that if you want to listen to some of the trials, tribulations, and interesting things with artist dolls.
So, what's it called? Now that we've kind of like seen examples of these dolls, and we've talked quite extensively on the parts of the doll, how that it's strung up, and the different features that you can get for these dolls. How about like for people that are new to resin dolls that are watching this now or sometime in the future, can you give some recommendations on like good companies that people can start out with, like something that people can buy into and they know that it's a trustworthy site and like it's a good product. Not that there's bad products like everywhere. It's just that something that you would recommend for a beginner.
Okay, hold on to your hats. I'm going to do a list and I'm going to do it slowly. Not for the people that are in chat right now, but for the people later on demand, who can go through this slowly and pause. Doll Zone, one of the original companies from China, um, is now getting into more artistic looking dolls. Started as a recaster. More on that later. Um, they got better. It got better. Um, Lutz, famous for Delph, but now they have a new sculpting group. Once again, an entire podcast on that. Beautiful dolls, wonderful resins. Um, Also, that website does have other companies' dolls there, which are all trustworthy. Fairyland BJD, we've already talked about. I own a lot of them. Ring Doll, also from China. I also talked about them in one of the podcasts because they were also at Doll Acon. Peepos Doll was one of the first ones I can recall to do an anthro doll. I think starting with a Cheshire cat, for those of you who love Alice in Wonderland and love those vibes. Dollmore has kind of model dolls, which is to say lengthier people that look like they should be running down a runway, and some other sorts of dolls too. Also a whole lot of clothing. Bambercrony was
Is it Amber Crony or Bamber Crony? You said.
It's like Bambi.
Oh,
so
okay.
Like the deer, and then Crony, Crony. Somewhat, I think where they shine is this what's called USD scale, about 25-ish centimeter tall doll, which is lovely to dress up, a childish look, and very small, lightweight, easy to travel with if you want a travel doll, or if you want a doll that you can dress in kid-like clothing. If you want one to dress up like the platelets in oh my gosh, what's that anime with all the blood stuff and the human body stuff? Chat, help me.
Well, that could be a number of anime with.
The one with the red blood cell and the white blood cell.
Oh,
And
Cells at Work.
yeah,
Cells at Work. Yes.
So if you want like a little platelet doll, like USD is kind of the aesthetic you're looking for, this size. And Bambercrony has a lot of, I love their kind of childlike looks in their doll. Volks, we've already talked about, the big old super daddy progenitor of the consumer market for Asian ball jointed dolls. Doll Chateau was an offspring from Doll Zone. I think some of their sculptors shot off, and they do these interesting fantasy, kind of spooky, sometimes body horror, interesting things. I say this with a smile. Every to each their own. So very interesting things there. Dalshi, very famous for now extremely long wait times.
Oh,
now
wow.
some of these like a year, 2 years, some of these people like wait, and sometimes I think I've heard stories where people never got their dolls, but
Oh, goodness.
they're very famous for very large dolls. They were some of the first ones to get into like this 75 centimeter tall dolls.
Oh, wow, that's pretty big.
Yeah, and very male masculine dolls, which is a dire, like, maybe I should put your head back on, buddy, so you can see this is like kind of earlier in the hobby, and it's kind of swimmer body, right? It's not like I'm a muscle man with big old pecs and all that.
I think you mentioned the company earlier. You said Ring Doll. I've seen, some ring dolls for the men because I remember they made a samurai one that I was really
Yeah.
interested in, and he was like built like the Hulk. Like he had like these really defined musculature tones to him, and I was
Oh
like, this guy
yeah.
looks really cool. But it also was a doll company when I was doing my research is has the same thing that you talked about earlier as well with the with the genitalia. It was a very defined male genitalia for the ring doll, and I think it even had options to change it. It had like a magnet in it where you can do
Yes.
sizes basically.
Yeah, I think it was very colloquially known in the community. There was something that they called it that was a loose. First of all, if you ever hear someone in the community referring to milk parts, that
Mm-hmm.
was like a very, very, very old Google translation for bust parts,
Hmm.
milk parts, or maybe they Google translated, or China or Japanese or Korea tried to translate what a bust would be, and they ended up with milk parts. I wouldn't use milk parts colloquially, but it's very funny to me. But I think when they were referring to the male genitalia, they and the extra parts, they just simply referred to it as option parts. There was also one famously that went around that had an attachable snake,
Oh,
just just a straight up snake with fangs and everything. Very. I think I did talk about it in one of the podcast episodes, so look forward to that. You can probably
wait, is this a snake that attaches to the down there area kind of thing?
yes, it's
Wow.
a snake that
Okay.
attaches between the legs. They one of these companies really they went hard. They went for it. Yeah, it's art, right?
Yeah, it's their version of art. I mean, they can do
Yeah.
whatever they want, and there's a market
Anaconda
for
in the
it.
sheets.
There's a market for it.
Yeah. So Ring Doll absolutely has some very masculine men. Even more masculine than that, uh Ipple House. Ipple House,
Oh, I've heard
IPLE
of that company.
House.
Yes.
It's if it for a later portion, there's like custom dolls, like a full choice doll that you can make from them, but you have to be a member. So it's kind of hard to get in and look at the pictures without like making it. And if
Oh,
I
I
was on
see.
my different computer, I might have given you a slightly different pictures for some of the stuff that we're going to talk about later. But like they have very muscular guys, a lot of locking stuff on their joints because their resins are so thick and solid and they're so
Mm-hmm.
tall. There's a lot of mass. So they created a lot of locking mechanisms to keep them stable. Actually one of the best standing resins I had, but also because they're so chunky, you can't move a solid object through a solid object, so it didn't pose as well as some of my lankier dolls, but more stable. A little give and a little take.
Right. There's like
Um,
a good thing and a bad side to it. It's like a double edged sword.
yeah, my last ones to mention are like Soul Doll, which is one of the few doll places I see that still sells heads. I think that's an anti-recast thing. More on that later. And Zoom, which used to be my go-to place for eyes, particularly silicone eyes. Silicone eyes are great because they're pliable, so you can put them in the head easily, um, and it'll conform to the eye cavity nicely. I love silicone eyes. Um, so I just listed a long list. There's also places that you can go that have just lists of dolls,
Mm-hmm.
like, and they're like retailers for them. What's the word? Dealers.
Mm-hmm.
um Alice's collections, ones you've talked about before: Denver Doll Emporium, Fabric Friends and Dolls.
Mm-hmm.
Junkie Spot, I looked at it. It used to be very helpful in the hobby and used to have a lot of obitsu and stuff like that as well. But it looks like it has a little less now. It probably suffered from time and perhaps COVID. There's a new one called dolkus.com,
Oh yeah, yeah. It's
DOLKUS.com.
known as also Dolk Station.
Yes, Dolk Station. Yep.
Yeah.
And that'll also have a full list of things.
Yeah, Dolk Station. I recently found out about them when I went to Japan because they have like these stores all over the place, and they carry like a whole bunch of resin dolls, and not from one company. There's like multitudes of companies that they carry all these dolls from. So yeah, that's another one that I know is pretty reputable about carrying good products. Mostly because I've seen it in person.
Uh, my Ding Ding Dong mentioned that they're waiting for a Swigentoe by Dolk. Um, uh, they were supposed to release last year, but they got delayed to this year, hopefully. Um, they do. The nice thing about that shop is that when there's something that's a licensed doll,
Mm-hmm.
but the licensing is a little hokey for the U.S., they're an Asian retailer, so you can still buy it from them.
Oh.
So like, I don't remember if the Attack on Titan was ever officially given the okay to sell in the U.S. I
Mm-hmm.
know some of the Black Butler stuff wasn't given the okay to sell in the U.S.,
Mm.
but you could still buy it through Dulk.
Mm.
So it's a nice little workaround.
Yeah, I remember
Um,
Levy was on display at Dulk when I was in Japan. That's how I saw him there.
yeah. So notice the one place I didn't really mention was eBay.
Mm.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the problem with dolls, resin dolls. Resin dolls are a hard material that can be easily what's called recasted. Your typical Asian ball jointed doll, for what's the tiny one, the USD one, is considered what's a 1/6 scale. Your larger ones, like most of your Dolphy Dreams, are considered a 1/3 scale, about approximately 1/3 the height of the average human being. And the mini Dolphy Dream, or uh, mini Super Dolphy, or Super Dolphy Meaty is the contemporary one now,
Mm-hmm.
is what's considered your 1/4 scale. From me putting together, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 or so of these companies I was listing, your 1/6 scale is usually around $200 or so for your average one, maybe 300. Um, but it begins between 300 or 400 for your premium dolls, which is to say your Fairyland,
Mm-hmm.
with all those fun extra joints, and your Volks, the progenitors of the contemporary doll movement. Your 1/4 scale, between 250 to 300, paying your premium on Volks for about 450, 460, premium on Fairyland around 400. And then we get our 1/3 scale. And these are all just kind of like the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Volks is
Like
weird
a general
because,
price, I guess you could say.
yeah, Volks is interesting because they don't really have basics like other dolls have basics, because you can't really buy them blank. Except now I guess you can with the full custom service
Or like the
in the
full
US.
choice.
In the US, you can
Mm.
choose to be blank, which is interesting because Japan doesn't have that option. But anyway, too long a story. So on the other end of it, you're around 400 through $500 on average.
Mm.
Eiffel House really goes up because there's a lot more resin that goes into those chonky boys and chonky ladies. They have some lady thighs that are wonderful, and men chests that are you could, yeah, they're good, they're pretty. Um, so with all this, that's what you should probably looking at for a doll, unless it's missing a finger,
Mm-hmm.
died, broken, something like that,
So
yellowed.
essentially, it
Um,
kind of follows the same thing with vinyl dolls, where obviously the smaller scale of the doll is the lower price, and as bigger you go, the prices kind of go up.
yeah.
Um,
Speaking of yellowing, please note that vinyl resin yellows. This is white skin. This was white skin.
oh wow, you could really see the color difference when they're like right next to each other.
Yes. So it was Tempest is. almost a decade old, if not more at this point. This boy was a COVID buy. This is one of
Hmm.
my two COVID dolls,
These are
so to
recent.
speak. Everybody has one, right? It's not just me.
You
I
know,
don't have a
I
problem.
definitely have some COVID buys.
Sitting at home thinking about life and mortality and memento mori, and you just go, but what does make me happy? What is art? Is art important? Is supporting artists important? Maybe I should buy a doll. Um, oh, Jay Louisa also mentioned BJ Divas for another dealer that's good. Thank you, Louisa.
Thank you, Louisa, for the suggestion.
Yeah,
I know that we talked about like different companies, and we kind of generally went over the pricing. You know, like as
yeah,
low as around like 385 to could be as much as around like $600 ish.
yeah.
But also just to add on to that is that especially if we're talking about collaboration or licensed dolls, those go even higher.
Oh, yeah.
Like the pictures we had earlier up today of the Anna and Elsa, which I'll show you guys again, just so you guys
Yeah,
can
I
see
think
it.
I had their prices jotted down.
I think they were like 1,000, right?
I think Elsa, which is a slightly taller one,
Mm-hmm.
is 1,200,
Mm-hmm.
and Anna is 950, because I was writing down notes for
Mm.
the same dolls because they're contemporary to this podcast. Podcast? Yeah, we'll call it podcast.
Stream
Yeah,
vodcast. It's like a vodcast.
podcast. There we go.
But yeah, like if
Um,
you have a licensed doll, they can obviously go higher, just like they do with vinyls, right?
yeah, that being said, if you add extra things like the Fairyland website has this really cool limited right now that comes with translucent bat wings, full outfit, fantasy pieces, horns, full face up
Mm-hmm.
outfit, uh 1,350.
Mm. Yeah, so
Oof.
sky's the limit with these for sure.
Yeah, depending on what you get.
Right.
So those are the prices you should expect to pay for a ball
Okay.
jointed doll.
So if you're primarily, let's say, a vinyl collector for Dolphy Dreams or Smart Dolls, getting into the resin hobby, at least from price point wise, is pretty much similar for the most part. You would say,
Yeah.
yeah,
and
okay,
and and especially if you're keeping to the non premium brands.
mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to describe this concept of premium because they're all artists, they all make their dolls. Volks obviously has a brand name that you know, like Ferrari, like
Right, right,
it carries weight to it. And even with the price discrepancy between Anna and Elsa, technically Anna has the more complicated outfit to make and everything else. Um, but Elsa's more expensive because this constructed scarcity of the type of body that she's on that they're making, that can be 3 hours. Folks construct scarcity. We'll leave it at that. When it constructs scarcity, the items they construct scarcity for, even they charge more for when they have two limiteds right next to each other,
mm-hmm.
where one you can buy a standard version of, or at least a full custom service version of at any given point if you can access their shops, and the other one you can't. They constructed scarcity, thereby they must charge more for the one.
Mm.
That's the short version. I'm
And
sorry.
Venatic in chat actually asked a question: what causes yellowing on dolls? Is there any way to prevent it or revert it? We actually talked about this in, I think it was Beyond the Doll episode 4, I think it was, where it was maintenance and care. And from what I learned actually from Becca, because she was actually watching that stream and commented on the same stream, that yes, you can get yellowing on resin as well. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you also said it cannot be reverted. Like once it yellows, right?
Yeah, you can try a little bit with Oxy, but what's really happening is, especially on certain dolls, you have colors in the pigments. And just like when you're looking at, let's say, a painting from the Renaissance, it's not the same painting that you would have seen if you saw it 300 years earlier because different pigments decay at different rates. And they decay with time, moisture, and light. Light being a very very like important one, to the point where when you're doing face ups, there's something called, that's a clear coat that's called Mr. Super Clear UV cut.
Yes.
And Volks developed its new resin, which is supposed to yellow less, which is UV cut resin. Um, and the more translucent your resin, the easier it's going to yellow because the more light passes through it. So you have blue pigments that fade, which brings out the reds and the yellows. So as your blue fades, your yellow seems brighter and your reds seem brighter. Plus, you have just like an old PlayStation 1. If you sat it out in the sun, it'll start to kind of turn that yellowy,
it starts getting this weird like yellow brownish color.
Bingo. Once again, resin is a plastic, so it just happens. The best and saddest way to deal with your resin yellowing is to never let it see the light of day, but that's not...
or anything really, like vinyl, resin, even if you collect regular things like statues, Nendroids, Figmas, you always want to keep those items out of the sun. It doesn't mean you can't put them in the sun. Like, you could take them out, do photo shoots, go hang out with friends with your dolls, but I wouldn't recommend, like, let's say, having your doll, figure, whatever you have, on a shelf in front of a window. Like that would pretty much increase your chances of yellowing your doll or figure or statue at an incredible rate.
So, in my opinion, yellowing for a collection that you actually have out and play with and engage with is going to happen. Maybe if you have a limited doll that you want to keep for posterity and value's sake, maybe put it away or put it in an area with low light or things like that. Otherwise, play with your dolls and enjoy them. Eventually, the pigment of the skin, the color of the skin is going to change. When that happens, probably by then you've touched the face a bunch of times, maybe worn away the face up, send the face up out to be refreshed. It'll be, or paint it yourself if you're crafty. At that point, you're going to end up with a doll that it has a paint on its head again that better matches the complexion again, and you're going to re-engage with your doll again. Dolls are dolls for a reason. They're created in a way that you can engage, pose, and interact with them. Otherwise, we would collect static figures. It's by the nature of our dolls, they will change, they will go places, they will get scars, but that is the beauty of time. It's like aging a scotch. Was the scotch or whiskey good when it started? Yeah, sure. Is it also good when it's aged? Also, yes. Different flavor, but also good.
Very true. Now, I want to touch upon something that you mentioned before, but I just want to give it a little bit more attention, is that this is something we don't see with Dolphy Dreams and Smart Dolls, or even A-Zone for that matter. We don't really see this in this type of hobby, and you mentioned it before that you see it a lot in resins, and that's what you call recasts or fakes. Yes. So there's a lot you need to be aware of as somebody that's getting into resin, that there are companies out there that sell fake versions of dolls that you love. And I think you sent me a picture of something, and I want you to explain it to the viewers what we're going to be looking at. Let me just change it over here.
So this is what's colloquially known as a head plate. Being that Volks was the progenitor of dolls, and Volks creates scarcity, once again, they created a situation where they were prime targets for people to copy and sell their dolls at the same price that they did. This is done by creating a mold. Where's my little piece of plastic here? From an object. And then you create your 2-piece or however many piece mold. You sometimes destroy your master in the process. And then you make copies until your mold breaks away. The people that are making it are not the original creators of the doll. It does not put money back in the hands of the people that will be creating new, beautiful, wonderful dolls for you. Um, because this is a process that, while it creates toxic fumes, doesn't require any high cost equipment. It doesn't require equipment to spin a centrifugal force of a giant vinyl thing that you've seen in some of Danny's videos. It just requires you to have the mold and the resin. The resin itself can be somewhat expensive pound for pound, depending on what type of resin you get. It can be done, like I said, there's 2 to 3 people artist dolls. Like they can do it right in their house within 2 to 3 people. Meanwhile, those people will never sculpt you a new sculpt, never create new concepts. They will just copy and sell. Sometimes they do it hard on sleeve. This is a recast. I'm selling it to you. Hey, I can even make it any color you want. What color do you want? What color do you want? They like open their coat. What color doll do you want? Which one do you want? Which one do you want? I can make your dreams come true, baby. But meanwhile, the other dolls, the other companies, aren't getting this money back for their R&D to invest back into the company, to pay their employees. And remember those little 2 and 3 people artist doll shops that I've talked about? People recast those. Like
it's essentially it's just very harmful to the hobby.
Extremely so. Yes.
Extremely harmful. I mean, and you also don't want to be a collector that's collecting things, like, especially if you are a quote unquote collector, so to speak, and you're not just I guess buying dolls because you just like them for whatever reason. If you're like one of those people that like to collect because you just have that affinity to collect things, it would really suck if you bought a doll that you thought was real and then it's not, and it just so happens to be fake. Not only is it you're depressed by the fact that you bought a fake doll and it's not real, there's also, even with the recast, it's not like they are perfectly made. You're going to have issues and problems with them, and the makeup might be off or the proportions might be off because it is a fake. It's not a real thing. And this notoriously happens a lot from what I understand in the resin community. It's like a huge uproar.
It happens a lot on eBay. They'll be lower than the cost that should be on the official website by a lot. They'll be sold blank, maybe with eyes or something like that. And there'll be tons of them. And they'll like be just like ABG Day 1/3 boy. And it'll maybe list a few names of several companies, but not actually the company that they copied it from. The best thing you can do to arm yourself against a recast, if you want to buy things used, is to actually delve into the recast forums and see they have master lists and master Google Sheets saying this doll was recast, this doll was recast, this doll was recast. So if you know it was the doll you're looking for, it looks like a pretty good deal, like looks like some legit picture that doesn't look like it came out of China, and you're like, is this deal too good to be true? A good way to do that, like the recasters, the recast community catalogs everything that happens. And while I definitely don't condone buying a recast, I will say if they're going to catalog the information for us to have to ensure that the people that want to support the hobby continuing by making sure our money goes towards putting it towards the people that will continue to make new sculpts and continue the hobby, then that's what we should be doing. And if they put that information out there to the public, then we can use it. So you can look through that list and say, they've never made a Lishy head, a Delph Lishy head. They definitely have. They have. So I'm safe in buying this, even though it seems a little cheaper. It's probably just yellowed, or the person just trying to tear down their collection quickly, or et cetera, et cetera.
So in this picture here, what we can see, or at least what we're showing the viewers, is this is an actual plaque or stamping on the head from Volks, so that you know that it's an official product. Do other resin doll companies have something similar, or is this uniquely a Volks thing that you would see on Volks dolls?
No, so Volks started it. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The recasters looked at it and learned their system.
Well, that's
Um,
not good.
nope. They looked at it and they learned their system and they said, "Oh, okay, we get it now." At first, they didn't understand what the numbers and everything were. So they would recast like a limited edition from a Dalpa, and the date, the numbers on the back of the head for limited editions actually refers to the date it was released, and people would realize it was a recast by looking at the numbers and realizing the date that was listed there wasn't the date that that limited edition was released.
Hmm.
Um, Other dolls like Full Choice System are just a sequential number that goes up and up and up, so it's hard to tell with those. So eventually that ended up being not helpful. Um, so a lot of companies ended up having
Oh,
plates.
let me change the view so people can see. Let's see. There you go.
Yeah, so a lot of companies ended up having plates. The other thing is plates are glued in. So, yoink. Unfortunately, over time, hey, actually, that's an example of staining on a doll. Um, I never realized it because it was under a wig. I don't think about it much. Eventually, glue gives way.
Mm-hmm.
It just does, and it's a little tiny metal plate, and it gets lost. So just because your doll's missing a plate doesn't mean it's a fake, or the one you're looking at doesn't mean it's a fake. It means it's possibly a fake, or it could even be mean that it is prior to them initiating this thing where they tried to put plates in to try to desensitize the recasters.
Hmm.
Then companies did, which I think is so funny. It's almost like a step backwards in a way, but then they started doing certificates of authenticity.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So that one was from Denver Doll Emporium itself,
See, we
and then
don't
this
in the vinyl
this one,
community, we don't have those certificates for our dolls. The only time that we would get something similar to that I know of at least, is if you go to Volks and you create a doll, like a doll choice.
yeah,
They would actually have a birth certificate that you would fill out and the clerk would fill out, and I kind of tease and say it's like their birth certificate for the dolls. And I have three of them because I have three Dream Dolphy Choice dolls, so I have three of those certificates. But if you get like an anime collaborated doll or just a standard doll, they're not going to come with certificates like that. So that's different.
but then those are just pieces of paper. The most they can do is print it on. This is like a two-sided, double-sided printed cardstock that's a pretty nice quality paper with a barcode. This one has a barcode on it. And they create like a database, I guess, so that they can, if you sold it secondhand, you could contact them and see. Um, but like other than like what I wrote on my website. So I have a website. It's ningyobingo.com, ningyobingo.com. I have two articles kind of on there that have weird typos because HTML. Um, and one was on what's a ball jointed doll, and the other one is what's a recast. What I wrote in there is that bootlegs will always exist as long as there's technology to create a copy and people that want to make money off of making copies.
Hmm.
All the way back to VHS tapes. I mean, even if we put RFID chips in these resin dolls, which would be hard because the endothermic reaction, it gets pretty hot when it's setting.
Yeah.
You've seen people create reprogrammable amiibo cards.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't even work. So it's like the only way you can really do it is to educate yourself and buy directly from the retailer or from communities that are trusted.
Right.
um, which is partially why Den of Angels is so incredibly gated for you trying to get into their marketplace. That's a whole other discussion. I understand what they're trying to do. They're, I'm going to leave it there.
So another thing about these recasts, and you've pretty much summed it up really well on these recasts, is with vinyl dolls we don't get much of it in vinyl dolls, and that's because the ability to recreate a doll in vinyl, it's not that it's hard. I mean, if they really wanted to do it, they could probably make fakes of all the vinyl dolls, but it's
and
just
they made one Miku.
yeah, there was a Miku that went a regular, I think, no, not a regular, it was a snow Miku.
Snow Miku.
It was a snow Miku that was being sold as a fake on eBay or some various forums. We've seen it pop up. It's not like it cannot be done, but there is a lot more problems or issues that they have to overcome in order to make a recast, quote unquote, of a vinyl doll. And it's not as exact a science, so to speak, as Danny Chu always reminds us, that when you make a vinyl doll, it's all dependent on the heat, the cooling, the mold. Like, it's not always going to come out the same, or it's very hard to make it come out the same. Whereas with resin, it seems to be something that's easier to do as long as you have a mold. So it's not that you can't find fakes for vinyl dolls, but it's just so difficult and probably more money for them to achieve that it's just not worth it for them at this point.
Yeah. There's a much higher buy-in, which you can, if you follow Danny Chu, you can see with what he has to pay to make his molds.
Yeah. I think he said like molds were like, I think he was talking about like a torso mold cost him almost $300,000 or something like that just for the mold.
Now obviously making bodies, those are pretty big molds and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But heads, I made this little piece and I could, within, I think, about $50 to $60, have enough of this material to make a reusable mold for a resin head. I've now, from 10 years ago to now, I was looking around for our segment later for the concept of a spare head to use for a special doll.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to be able to buy spare heads everywhere, with the exception of Volks because they're special. I found only one place that sells spare heads now. And I have the hypothesis because that creates a higher buy-in. And if the buy-in is higher, it's less likely that the recasters will be so gung-ho to go and buy that doll to recast it.
Right.
There's a very famous instance where they made this beautiful, huge panther. But they went in, they did the buy-in. And it was a beautiful Black Panther limited edition from this one company. Nope, they recasted it. I think that was Eiffel House. It might have been Eiffel House.
It's crazy. These people with their fakes out there.
Speaking of crazies and fakes, there might be another spammer.
Yeah, I just started like reporting them and getting rid of it. Yeah, it was the same person. I don't know how they got back in because I already reported them, but whatever.
Also, Louisa made a point that Etsy can also have recasts as well.
Ooh, that's weird.
A lot of recasts come from China. Normally dolls, like I said, it's Asian, colloquially known as Asian ball jointed dolls. Now there's a lot of dolls within the US that, even from artist dolls, that kind of follows the same aesthetic. Mm-hmm. But typically will be Japan, China, Korea, usually those.
Right.
But China is infamous for having the recasters. So if you are on eBay and you're saying, oh, this really cheap doll is coming from China, might be a recaster.
Yeah, it seems like it's a task in and of itself to make sure that you're not getting a recast doll.
I would say for your first doll, don't settle. Don't settle. There's so many, and I know some of the dolls on different companies have premiums, like Volks and Eiffel House can be a little bit more expensive. Fairyland can be a little bit more expensive. But even if the other ones or if it's a limited edition or something, don't settle. If you fall in love with the limited edition, get the limited edition. If you get the blank doll and you try to paint it and it's not quite right, you're not going to fall in love with it the same way. Um, so don't settle just for a lower cost doll, and certainly don't settle for a recast. Just don't recast. Just don't recast. Um, Save for the one that you really love, um, and ideally get it. Then they typically, if it's a basic doll, will be around for 2 to 3 years, at minimum, until the molds give out.
Hmm.
For most places. So take your time, save up. If you want to engage with the doll and create it as a project, and you're feeling crafty, buy it blank, and paint it. You'll bond a lot more with the doll. It's called bonding, similar, I think, across resin and vinyl. Um, Resin dolls are a lot more forgiving for putting on and taking off face ups. You can do it almost endlessly because of the way that the doll doesn't want to soak in the pigment as much. Um, they were even talking, well, we'll get into that later, but Volks was actually having trouble painting some of their newer dolls we're going to talk about later, because if they made a mistake, it was harder to take away the acrylic paint, because it would the solvent you would use to remove the acrylic paint would also open the pores on the vinyl and let the pigment soak in. Meanwhile, I can paint, rewipe, paint, rewipe for a decade or so, at least, on all of my resin dolls.
Hmm.
I've several of them I've painted 2, 3 times, no issues. I don't have to worry about putting on cover up because it's stained through. It'll just come right off. So save up for the one that catches your heart, even if it takes a little while.
Hmm.
You'll be happy.
Good.
If that means buying the company face up because you don't think you'll be able to do that. Wait
Good.
for it. Be patient.
Good sage
You'll.
advice, I would say.
Oh
Let me see. So a couple other things to get away from the whole recast thing.
geez, we've hit tomorrow, haven't
Yeah.
we?
To get
Happy
away from
30th.
the whole recast thing, so we've
Yes.
covered like basically we covered like different companies you may want to look into, the price range which is pretty similar in regards to resin and vinyl dolls when you're purchasing your dolls, and we talked about the recast or whatever. One thing I want to talk about, because you sent me a picture on this, I think it's really interesting, is something we haven't seen yet in vinyl, so to speak, which I think is really interesting, and that would be this picture here. Where is it? This one here.
Ah, anthro dolls. So the first anthro doll I can think of in the hobby was actually an artist doll, that was made in just a very small run, that was designed to fit on a plethora of bodies. The only limit to harboring two companies in resin is the color of the resin, and the circumference of the neck, and the circumference of the neck hole here.
Hmm.
So the first one that I can remember was called Ashbet's Mao, kind of inspired by an Egyptian Sphinx cat. So it was just literally a cat head on a human body. Now we have a lot of these anthro dolls going all the way down to like little tiny Cheshire cat like things from
Hmm.
Peepos dolls. I can't remember which brand this one was from. Oh, that one's also Peepos. Got it. To these larger ones from multiple companies, and we got wolves and cats, and we have fantasy creatures and centaurs and mermaids
Hmm.
and werewolves and harpies and um, onis and demons and horns and all these really cool things that you can do. And that little thin ear on that would be so hard to recreate in a vinyl, but is much easier to do in a gravity poured resin, where it would go right
Hmm.
down into that part of the mold. So I love the plethora of little subcategories that resin
Right.
has.
Yeah, the
Um,
resin definitely has that vinyl doesn't. Is the I guess you could say the fantasy aspect. They
oh
have
yeah,
so many fantasy creatures and fantasy I don't know what the right word is, like beast men, like this picture
yeah,
here, like a cat man or a dragon man or just
yeah.
the animals themselves. Right. And
This
even
company,
even little guys like that little purple guy, he is a resin and he's also strung up, right?
yeah, this one's actually in plastic because
Oh, this one's
they
plastic.
like but the company that did it originally has the same exact one in resin.
Mm.
I They made this as a plastic model kit a la Cortex, just a
Mhm.
little bit for Cortex. This company did it first. Um, I think it was Eileen Doll does these
Mm.
guys. And all sorts of cute little guys. And so they got these guys. I guess technically this little girl here has a cat face. Technically, she's an anthro, I guess. So she has a little kitty face.
Mhm.
These guys are fun because they have face plates. So the thing that I wish would have happened with Cortex, where you can just change out the face for a
Mm.
different character. You don't even have to remove the head. You just change out the face for a different character, which is
Kind of
amazing.
reminds me of like Nendroids, how you can just change the faceplate.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And like I said, that first one you picked out, the Unoa,
Mhm.
was like the progenitor of resin faceplates. So
Mm.
that was fun that you happened to pick that one. It wasn't one of the first and original releases of the Unoas, but that was one of the fun things they were known for, as
I just
well as some of
randomly found
the
that picture on the internet.
etchy content of the expressions on some of those faces.
Oh boy. So yeah, the only thing that we get that's closest to something like this would be an upcoming doll from Volks, which is the Y'shtola doll for Final Fantasy XIV, where
Yeah.
she has the ears, the cat ears. Now, because she's not released yet, I'm assuming it's a headband and it's not like actual ears coming out, or it may be attached to the wig or something
I
of that nature. But it's
Or
nothing to the level,
magnets.
or magnets, but it's nothing
I
to the
think it's
level
probably
of
gonna be
this where
magnets.
it's like a part of the head. Same thing with Ishtola having a tail. They said that she's actually going to have her tail because in the game she has it. So that's going to be one of, the originals, I guess you could say, from Volks that has that tail and that thing like that. I mean, there was a princess, I forgot the princess's name, from Dog Days that came out back in 2005 from Volks that also had the ears and the tail, but it's not done very often.
No.
And
Like,
then the last week, I think it was, like last week's episode of the Doll Symposium, I was talking about A Zone having a new Layla doll, which is also a wolf girl doll that has a tail and ears. So they're all like extra pieces that you can kind of like attach on, but they're not to the same level of this where it's like a whole kind of like animal beast kind of body and head kind of thing. Then that's
yes.
unique to resin.
Yeah, which I love. And once again, the ability for resin to be gravity poured into a
Mm-hmm.
mold and like really get into all these little nooks and
Mm-hmm.
crevices. And the the one thing that I noted like first when I got my vinyl doll was, I'm like, where's all the details in the ear? It's so like flat and chonky.
Yeah, the
Because
ear doesn't have a lot of detail.
so because I was used to this where there's all these little crevices, and when I'm
Mm-hmm.
painting it, I have to get in there and get like some like darker stuff in there to
Mm-hmm.
get it all done. So I was like, wow, that looks so weird. It's like chunky and it's not very deep. It doesn't look like an ear to me. I mean, it's a representation of an ear, but it doesn't look like an ear.
Right. So, other than that, for that, the next thing I wanted to talk about and touch base on was and we did talk about it a little bit earlier on in the stream, but I want to kind of go more in depth. Is the issue of maintenance and care, and also for within maintenance and care, there's also staining. And we did lightly touch upon this before, but I know you have some pictures to show in regards to staining. So let's tackle staining first, right? We're
Yes.
gonna
So
have this
if
picture
you're sensitive
here.
to the to dolly horror, look away now. The areas of white you see on this doll was purchased from someone on DOA by someone on DOA. Den of Angels is colloquially known as DOA. And all the white you see on there is resin dust, which, by the way, is very toxic. If you're sanding resin, you must wear a respirator. Important. Even just the dust is toxic. Very important. The previous owner attempted, without much knowledge of these dolls, to do a face-up with Sharpie. I won't say don't do that, because it's your doll. If you plan on owning it forever and you don't ever want to change it again, go for it. But I think you can get much finer details and everything using acrylics. If something is oil-based, an oil-based pigment will sink into the doll. So if you're using an eye putty that's oil-based, which is to say, like your sticky tack and stuff, you don't want to grab a color one. You want to grab a white one, because that can actually eventually stain. I don't know, because I heard about it. I don't have a picture because I heard about it, thereby I always bought the white non-pigmented ones. But this was so deep that they couldn't even sand it out.
Oh, wow.
It couldn't even sand it out. So like sometimes UV, like yellowing on a doll, because it's the nature of UV, it can only go through, light can only pierce through a solid object so far. If you sand down a doll, it'll actually go a little lighter in pigmentation from yellowing. Same concept with some staining. If you go in with a light sanding, or your micro abrasives, like your Mr. Clean eraser, or a melamine eraser, as is the non-branded term. Most resins will have, that will be enough to remove the dye that happened. This was the first thing that ever dyed any of my dolls.
Oh, black choker.
A black, actual real leather choker that actually had real dye in it. And even this, I took a melamine sponge and it was patient. And when it didn't come off, when it was dry, I added a little water and I went a little longer. And eventually it did come off. And I didn't have to go too hard, too long. But like if you really go hard on that pigment, it will go through. When doing a face up on any doll, it's always recommended that you put 1 or 2 base coat layers first. Not only because the tooth, it gives a little bit of grit to your textures for pigments to grab onto, but it also creates a layer between your pigment and your resin or vinyl, so that should the pigment want to leach, it has to get through those layers first.
Yeah, so those are your like protective layers before you do anything else to the face, I guess you could say.
Yes.
Okay.
Now there was one other picture that we found, but I was Googling today. I found this one via Reddit.
So people, it has a little bit of doll nudity on here too, so just be aware when we show this staining picture.
It's just got a little peach on the top. We like peaches, they're sweet. So what you see there is 2 streaks, probably because that was where the friction or a seam was on there from like a stocking or something like that.
Stocking or probably jeans or something, maybe.
Yeah. And that was probably where it was leaning against it. So I see this and it looks pretty, it looks like it'll sand away. And the commenter actually said, the original poster, the OP, as the internet term is called, actually commented, should I be coating my doll more? Which actually made me wonder, most of my dolls I actually don't have the bodies coated. Sometimes like I said, when you spray on your Mr. Super Clear or other thing, it actually creates a bit of a tooth that can pick up pigment. I'm wondering if by the nature of them creating the clear coat, and actually faces tend to not touch pigmented things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if it's actually the clear coat that's picking up the pigment rather than actually the resin,
Mm.
which is a possibility.
And if it's the clear coat, maybe you could just easily sand that away, maybe?
You could easily sand it, or with a straight up, you can just straight up put acetone directly on resin.
Oh, okay. Something you can't do with vinyl.
Yeah. Now, you can't, I wouldn't soak it in there because it will eventually soften.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just wiping, you can easily do that.
Mm.
If there's stronger pigments in your dolls, that might cause an issue with pigments for those who have maybe what Danny refers to as cocoa, which I am going to refer as stronger melanin tones. Um, that can affect that. So you always want to go from least amount of solvent to most amount of solvent when trying to remove something, to try to be as gentle as you can.
Right.
But
Find like a
typically,
good test area too, somewhere like maybe under the foot where it wouldn't really show.
yeah, but usually, like for removing face ups and things like that, I straight up go to 100% acetone on my dolls,
Hmm.
which you have to use different solvents to remove face ups on Dolphy Dreams, because when you do that, the pores go open up and then it kind of just grabs that pigment and goes and brings it right in,
Hmm.
right into the party. Gonna be
Right. Right.
partying forever there.
Yeah, that would be dangerous for vinyl.
You can actually shrink vinyl heads by soaking them in acetone and
Oh
then
my
letting them
god.
dry it out.
Yeah, I
Uh,
don't want to try that.
People have done it successfully to make dolls' heads that are supposed to fit on Dolphy Dreams fit on mini Dolphy Dreams, which is fun.
Hmm. And I think hold on, let me try this out. We had a couple questions that were coming up in chat. One was by where is it? I just lost it for a second there. Oh, here. My ding ding dong, right? Says, do Volks ever re-release their Dolphy Dreams? For the most part, no. There are a couple. Like if it's a really popular character, like Rei Ayanami has a couple iterations. Asuka has two. Rin Shibuya has two. Rise, I think, has two versions of her. Saber has like six versions of her. But they're always a second version or a third version or something like that. They don't normally recreate the same exact version for a re-release. I believe it was back in 2019 or 2018 before the pandemic. They had a very special event for an anniversary where they were asking people to send them emails or whatever. I forgot what remedy they used to find out, but they were doing a poll trying to figure out what dolls would you like to see re-released from Volks. And I think Rise was one of them that was actually picked for a re-release. So that one wasn't a version 2, it was an actual re-release of the original version. And we have this guy spamming my chat again. I didn't think I was that popular that I actually get spammers. What is going on
I
here?
know, like 14 people watching, but apparently this
This
person
one person just loves to spam me.
really wants to watch.
Yeah. So, I
Um,
mean, they don't normally get re-releases. How about for Resin, on the Resin side? What do you know anything about re-releases of dolls?
so typically most Volks is an outlier. We'll come here in a second. We're going to just place that right over there. Volks, we'll get to you in a moment. Most dolls don't end up having re-releases because usually your limited dolls are not a limited, but a full set. So it goes to basic.
Mm.
And once it's basic, you can get it, you just can't get the full set. So you can always get that sculpt again.
Mm.
Occasionally dolls that the molds break down, they get discontinued. Maybe they'll resculpt it, or maybe they'll find the original and make a new master and then re-release it. That recently happened on Cerberus Project for the Lishi head. And I actually bought a new Lishi head, which is very interesting. I don't even remember where I put that, somewhere around here. Where but it's not exactly the same. It's a little smaller. There's small changes, but it's essentially the same idea and the same sculpt. Aha, here it is. Wonderful. So it was essentially discontinued and reissued, even though it lived for a decade or more as a basic. But then through shenanigans, which is a whole podcast, was re-released. So here we have a nice, oh my god, the white tones. There we go. Need to put that in the shade. Um, blank one. And would you believe? Once again, that's white. That used to be white skin, but those are technically the same sculpt,
Wow.
but
Huge
there's
difference.
little differences to it. Like her head is actually smaller to the point where if I try to put this head on this old body, the neck is a different size.
Mm.
So they changed the neck mechanism a bit different. This neck chin protrudes a little bit more. So when they resculpt it, it's like different.
Mm.
I think the molds they use for vinyl can be used more times without degradation than a resin mold.
Mm.
Okay, now so that's if there's a re-release, they usually have to resculpt it. If they discontinued it, it's probably because the mold died.
Mm.
And they have to either refine the master or resculpt it from scratch. Now let's
Okay.
talk about Volks with their created scarcity. Certain sculpts are available all the time, which is their standard releases and even their full choice system in Japan or in the US via the monthly full choice system. Other ones are only released as limiteds, which is to say limited quantity, limited time. Almost all of Volk's limiteds are either a click war or a lottery.
Mm.
There is very few of the, if any, that I can recall of the pre-order version that we see sometimes, like 2B was. Everybody that pre-ordered in the pre-order period got one. It's just unlike the Dolphy Dreams, which are often painted with masks, so you can put the mask on, spray paint a layer, put on mask on, spray paint a layer. The dolls' heads are painted by hand individually, which takes a longer time. And it just takes longer. Plus the resins take time to cure. I've ordered this head in January. It got here last month. It's just they had that many orders. It's a blank head. And it took that long to get through all their previous orders to get to me, just because it takes time, and even just curing the resin takes time. So Volks creates their scarcity, right? And there's certain sculpts they only release like that. So what they do to re-release it, so they don't make these other people that was like, I got my Volks Williams pirate version. Now they're like, now we have Volks Williams dancing at the ball version.
Mm.
Now we have Volks Williams disguising himself as a lady at the ball version.
Mm.
Now we have the Williams romantic Lance version, where instead of the eyes open, we have the eyes kind of half dreaming.
Mm.
And they do little differences with each re-release. Sometimes they'll release it on a different and updated body and things like that, updated outfit. But it'll essentially be more or less the same character they're releasing, but they do little changes.
Okay. And I think Baby Bunting Nursery has said Reborn doll vinyl kits have very intricate details. That's news to me because I don't know that company. So I guess this Reborn doll, they have very intricate details.
I wasn't aware. I thought most Reborn were silicone.
I don't know. I don't know
I know
much
the
about
bodies
this company.
are silicone, but maybe they also have vinyl dolls. Reborn dolls are typically looks like as close as you can to an actual real baby.
Okay, like a baby,
Yeah, so
like a real child.
Yeah, they make it look hyper realistic.
Okay.
Yeah, so people are very into that very big subset of doll stuff. It's very cool and interesting, almost just like the American Girl Customs is a whole different line.
Yeah.
There's all these cool things. The Monster High and the Monster High customs. Ooh, very fun stuff. I have one right up there. Um, so
And then same person, Baby Bunting Nursery, also says you can definitely use acetone on vinyl to remove oil paints. This is another thing I don't know about because I don't usually do face ups or anything. So
if you do use acetone on a vinyl, lightly, quickly rinse it off afterwards. You do the it does have the possibility to open up that pore, and then the pigment can come in. So if you're going to use acetone on a vinyl, quickly rinse off. It's if you can at all avoid it, that would be my recommendation. But if there's a pigment that's really, really, really stubborn, you can break it out, but you might risk opening up the pore for it to trap the pigment in there.
I see. And then because we did start initially talking about staining, and then we talked about other things, but just to comment a little bit more, like a quick recap, because we've been doing it all throughout like the stream today. It's mentioning little
Like
things
the
here and
pros
there,
and cons.
but
Yeah.
like the things with maintenance and care, just to touch base real quick so other people, like if you're joining later, things like you know, you don't want to put them in the sun or in direct sunlight, kind of like same thing with vinyl dolls. And the one thing that's unique to resin dolls that we talked about earlier and we touched upon is the elastic band that keeps it together. You mentioned that that does eventually need to be changed out at some point in order to keep the doll, I guess, fresh, you could say.
Yeah, to keep it posing nice and
Right.
keep it
And
from being too floppy.
yeah, too
Like,
floppy. And we just recently
she's
covered
not too bad.
staining. So we were talking about like the whole staining thing and how you can kind of recover. Yeah, that one looks like it's flopping around a little bit.
he needs a refresh.
But for the most part, those are usually the maintenance and care things that you would run in with resin dolls, right? It's just either elastic band, either stainings, and keep them out of sunlight, really.
Yeah, that's
I would say.
basically it. Face ups can wear away if you touch at them with your hands. They can chip if you make a dire mistake and it takes a head plant on you. You might have to eventually touch up or redo a face up. But for the most part, I sit my dolls here in my room, and here I could have them sit for a decade, and they might yellow. The elastic might lose tension, but otherwise, they're pretty solid. They'll be here. They're a plastic. The pigments decay, but the plastic itself is pretty stable. ABS plastic can get like brittle over time on joints and sometimes fuse. I had some of my Mega Man Battle Network joints fuse and I tried to pose them and it snapped my heart.
Oh gosh.
Why? I obviously most of the pieces are free moving from each other, so you don't have that problem here. So yeah, they're pretty fairly easy to maintain. Not much to worry about.
Okay. So if you're coming over from, I guess, the vinyl side of the hobby, most of the maintenance and care is somewhat similar, except for the fact of the elastic band, which sets it apart. Now, one thing that I think it is also another thing we want to lightly touch upon is just like some pros and cons between the two of them. So what would you think, in your personal opinion, is something that's a real pro for resin dolls that you don't get in vinyl dolls?
I love the detail of sculpt that you can get in a resin doll, which I've mentioned with the ears, little things. One of my favorite things was I called them butt dimples. There was these on my one doll, which was a Feeple 70. There was these two little dots right where they kind of your hip bones would be. It was things like lovely little dots.
Right I think I know what you're talking about because some of my Dolphy Dream Girls do have that.
Yeah, and it just like was a lovely little detail. The amount that you can have transfer, and especially with deeper cavities and the like, and you can also have thinner areas. So those thin areas of the ear will be good. So like, which is eye wells, can be thinner. So you can almost make it to scale like the thickness of an eyelid before you hit the eye,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to a Dolphy Dream, which tends to be a bit thicker between the inner and the outer eye
Yeah, they
well.
have
They
more
kind
of
of
a ledge, I would say. Yeah.
they try to disguise it by making it curved,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a little thicker there,
Mm.
as opposed to the uh, resin dolls where you can make that pretty thin and have it work well. Recasts are notable for having those thin areas get too thin, because when you make a master out of something that already came from a mold, it starts to get like smaller and smaller and
Mm-hmm.
smaller because of shrinkage. You've had Danny talk about that, um, and that can lead to thinner pieces. Almost you could shine a light through it,
Mm.
and also joints that are very exacting and may be made to lock or things like that won't fit right anymore. Um, More points against recasts. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't be tempted. Um, so like with that as like a wonderful thing about the resin dolls that I love. Um, I love the feeling of the weight of them, which is a pro and a con.
Mm.
Definitely a con at cons, because you're carrying it around and it's pretty darn weighty. Um, but it feels like a piece of art as opposed to a plastic and vinyl toy. I say
Mm.
tenderly with my love, that understanding that artists make toys. But like it feels and presents itself a little differently.
Mm.
Um,
I've heard
you,
that from many vinyl resin doll collectors before, that one big con for them is when you take them out to conventions or cons, so to speak, they are much heavier than when you
so
take out a
much
Dolphy
heavier.
Dream or Smart Doll out.
So much heavier. It's like a I actually have a presentation on YouTube, I think, and a few of the cons I went to. I actually converted it like because like an ounce is a pound at the world around. I converted it to like liter bottles of soda.
Mm.
So like a 2 liter bottle of soda, I think was some of the heavier dolls, and like some smaller like little 1 liter things is more like a smart doll.
Mm.
Um, Also, once again, the amount of detail that you can get, because you can get all these cool varieties of sizes and things like that.
Right.
So because I don't have to worry about an internal frame fitting in here.
Mm-hmm.
You see how small a bracelet can be being threaded with elastic.
Right.
It just has to thread elastic through it. That's your limit. There's dolls tinier than this, would you believe? Usually artist dolls. Um, so with that being your limiting factor, there's very limited, there's no form factor limitation to how big.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, I think I mentioned it last time and I always forget the name of it. Dalmore Lucis? There's one that's basically the size of a 7 or 8 year old child. It will sit on your chair. It is, and you can buy kid clothes for it. All the way down to this size. Like, there's no limit on the form factor because you're not beholden to an internal frame. However, internal frames are wonderful for posing. They can hold in between poses. They can
Yes.
stand on their feet. I was astounded when I put together my crystal cortex, who's standing in the background back here. She's really cool. I was astounded because even without the stand in the back of her, I had her standing on the table in my house with 2 to 3 crazy cats for I think 2 weeks straight before she face planted. I didn't have to worry about her face planting and breaking anything.
Because she's a cortex.
Right. A cortex and even a vinyl wouldn't have to. If a resin doll face planted, my heart would be like, did anything break? Oh God. My elf ears, my fingers, is everything intact? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ear. Okay, we're okay. That I don't have to worry about. B, like, it just stood. It just stands there. There's
Hmm.
stability in even in the ankles. Meanwhile, to stand a resin doll without a stand is almost like a balancing contest in the way that people go to the beach and balance rocks. You're like leaning the head back a little, leaning
Hmm.
the hand forward a little, because you're looking for this equilibrium between the weight between the front and the back. They can stand on their own, but you have to do it in such a way that the force of their physical weight doesn't overcome the force of the friction in their ankles
Hmm.
or their knees or any of the pieces before there. And when you have double joints, it only exacerbates the problem because that's more places where it can be prone to a slip failure.
Mm.
So posing, vinyl wins. It's why I now have like 3, 4 vinyl or internal frame dolls, as you once put it, um, because
Yeah,
the internal frame.
that's a term that did not last very long.
Yeah, I like it though because it
for
anime
those of
dolls.
for those of you in chat or watching at this at a later date, there was a certain point in time, I want to say around 2013, 2014, where they tried to make a movement with vinyl dolls by differentiating them by saying resins were ball jointed dolls and vinyl dolls were IFDs or internal frame dolls because they had an internal skeleton. And there was like a small argument that came about this like way back in the day and died down really fast and just went into nowhere. Like you hardly ever hear anyone talk about IFDs ever.
I know, and it it makes sense to me though because there's so many internal frame dolls that are not anime dolls.
Hmm.
For example, there's Granado, which almost looks more like an Eiffel House doll that they made that has an internal frame. And so there's definitely stuff out there
Hmm.
that's not anime style. It's just most of them are anime style.
Right, but the term just didn't stick for whatever reason. You
Yeah.
barely hear anyone say IFDs anymore. Um, Now, moving on to another section that I wanted to cover was I think this is really interesting. So, if you come from a background like yourself, where you are a resin collector and you're all big in resin and and you make your move into vinyl, you're like, oh, I love vinyl now too. Vinyl is cool. But then you kind of have this weird in between where you're like, what if I had the coolness and I guess you can say the delicateness and intricacies of a resin head, but I put it in a vinyl body that has like an internal skeleton, so I don't have to deal with the being able to pose it and the rubber bands, right? Well, we stumbled upon something that we wanted to talk about, and that's going to be this here.
So I know that for half past forever, people have been hybriding their dolls with either anime heads and resin bodies or resin heads and anime bodies. Um, it's this is one of the ways to get you all the benefits of the resin head with the fine details and maybe more realistic look, and the internal frame body. Um, what you see here is something that on one of the Chinese shopping sites had this, and I found it via a YouTube channel. So if you just look on YouTube for anime, I think I just looked for Dolphy Dream resin hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
It popped up with that, um, and it creates instead of having tension pulled the head down, there's a wing nut that you screw down and
Mm-hmm.
pull the head down. Essentially, all you have to do for any of these dolls to have them sit there is to have something put through here and to have something to hold it down.
Right.
So for this lady, for her to sit on, I don't know, a peg on the top of a doll, I would just need something to tighten down and hold this. In this case, they used a wing nut. You could even use a washer and a silicone
Mm-hmm.
washer and like a rubber band to really hold it tight there. And then you have your head. The downside is they're heavier. The heads are physically heavier. As you scale up, that scales proportionally. So your little tiny heads don't weigh that much, but your 1/3 heads are a little bit weightier. So you might find that the weight of the head overcomes the friction of the joint a little bit, so the head's a little
Mm.
floppier, but otherwise, really great. And you can get more realistic looks or things like that with the wonderfully posing body that can stand on its own, possibly without a stand,
Right.
which is really cool.
So just for that added safety factor, if you were to put a resin head and use this kit to put the resin head on a vinyl body, uh, for safety, you probably want to have like a stand handy.
Yeah,
Because
and you
that
would
that
still want to
resin
stand.
head, like you said, is a little heavier. So even though the internal frame is pretty good at making them pose on their own, that extra added weight might toss it one way or another to fall over.
Yeah.
It's also important to note that this kit that Becca and I found, or actually Becca found and brought it to my attention, is only currently usable for Dolphy Dream bodies. That's what this adapter here in the middle is showing. This is really a Dolphy Dream body here, as well as here, just different versions between the DD3s and the regular DD F3. But it's not to say that you can't do something similar. Like if you have a smart doll head, the peg is not curved like this; it's more straight. But you could theoretically, I guess, sit the resin head on that peg, and then, like Becca said earlier, maybe use a rubber band to keep it in, or some kind of silicone washer to help keep it in onto that peg to make it stay. So it's not like it can't be done, and people have done it before. But this is a cool little piece that you can buy for your, at least for Dolphy Dreams, if you wanted to add a resin head to your vinyl body or your internal frame body. But what I think is more interesting than that, which is something that was just announced, well, not really just announced, but something that is going to happen relatively really soon. And I think it's going to be really cool, and the announcement of this, the timing of it is awesome, that we had this video for the
Yeah.
stream coming out about resin dolls, and then all of a sudden Volks is announcing another thing. So let me just go to that picture where you have these lovely girls. So for those of you that may not be familiar, Volks USA, starting August 1st through August, I believe, 31st, is having a lottery period where you can win a lottery, which just gives you the ability to buy one of these dolls. And essentially what they are is they're called Dolphy Icon. And Dolphy Icon has everything that's really cool about a vinyl body with an internal frame, but with the stylistic styling of a resin head. And you could see that from these pictures right here, the difference on the look of these heads compared to your regular Dolphy Dreams that you would buy.
Or even compared um 2B. 2B's head is still painted
Mm-hmm.
with masks, and the lines have to be sharp. There's no fading out of colors. There's like a little bit of like airbrushing on her
Mm-hmm.
cheeks, and that's about it. Meanwhile, on these dolls, there's smoky, there's translucence and everything because these faces are painted by hand. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where apparently there's a little bit of production issues because they're using the methodology they've developed for resin, but having to paint it on the vinyl. If they wipe the face up in the wrong way or make a mistake and try to backtrack, it can leave the pigment in the vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys are very special, very cool. Developed for the US, only was released once in Japan, originally
Right.
released in 2019 with the Dolphy Dream 3 body. But right as they were releasing that, they were also releasing the Dolphy Dream cubed body. So my hypothesis was that they were trying to get they had a bunch of Dolphy Dream 3 bodies in storage and they needed to get rid of them. So they sent them to America for this cool new thing. And they're like, yes, we'll make a design decision to make the joints stand out because everybody loves ball joints.
Yeah. Well, this time around for the 2022 release of Dolphy Icons, the ball joints will match the color of the doll. As you can see in the pictures here, the elbow joint on Clover, on Iris here that you could see, the purple and the greens match the actual vinyl body, which was a huge complaint a lot of people had with the 2020 and 2021 releases, I want to say, where
Yeah.
they were just regular pink Dolphy Dream
Yeah.
flesh tone colored ball joints. So
And
this is
they're
the
the
first
Dolphy
time they
Dream.
have matching.
Yeah. And they are the Dolphy Dream
Yes.
cubed
They are also on the new body.
frame.
It's not the DD3, it is now the DDF cubed or F3, however you guys want to say it.
Yeah.
Body. So this is big news coming out of Volks, which I think is really interesting too, that Dolphy Icon is, for lack of a better word, like a Volks USA exclusive. It
Almost
was
the way that SD16 Resin Girls used to be a Volks USA exclusive, which is really interesting. We keep getting these like super model-y look kind of things, which I guess is supposed to be speaking to, I mean, there's like, I'm forgetting a lot of these fashion doll magazine kind of things, but it kind of feels like they're trying to call out to that doll, American collector Tonner doll, and things like that. There we go. I remembered one.
Well, the thing with this is, since I don't really know too much about these Dolphy icons, I know a little bit about them, but normally when you get to this area of, I guess, a lottery, which is what they're doing here, these are pretty much only one, I'm assuming. Everybody's putting in their lottery number to see if they can get, I don't know, Sarah or Lilac, which there's only one. So essentially you can only have, counting the number of dolls here, 7 winners. I don't know if they have like 5 Clovers to give away or
They do.
10
They
Nickies.
do.
I don't know. Like
So
if it's
on
just
this
one or
one,
not.
so there's a few interesting things about this release, which is following in line with the other releases.
Okay.
The eyes may be a different color than what you're seeing. The wig might be a random wig. You have 7 options there. You can put in, to my understanding, for 7 different lotteries. If you win in 7 times, you are expected to buy all of them.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It is bad taste to not complete your order on a lottery for an Asian lottery system.
Yeah.
They might not allow you to order again.
Now, I don't know if that's because I primarily buy Smart Doll and Volks and now Azone, but I don't know if that's exclusively a Volks thing or if other companies do that. But if you enter a lottery and you, let's say, back out of your winnings, they remember that. And you could get on a ban list, or you could be, or it could hurt your chances of winning a lot or later.
You could have a soft ban.
Yeah, you could have like a soft ban or a perma ban. It's really weird. So if you do enter a lottery for one of these girls or more than one of these girls, make sure you're able to back it up and buy them, because you don't want to end up on a ban or / soft ban list.
Yeah.
But these girls are very, very, very cute. They've always been cute. It's just I was turned off by the joints not color matching.
Me too.
But now that they color match, oh my god.
Not to mention the Dolphy Dream F cubed body has various screws and things and plates that will allow you to tighten the joints over time as the plastic weakens,
right?
Which will allow you to keep it remaining in tension, which is almost more important because these guys have the unique frame colors, which may not be replaceable over time.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that too, that if you need replacement parts, you're not going to get them for these dolls.
Yeah.
They're not going to keep like extra hands or leg pieces or torso pieces like they do for regular Dolphy Dreams. Like, these are special colors. You're not going to get replacement parts if you get one of these girls, so you got to be real careful with them.
Yeah, so like so the only reason why I know you can enter for multiple is because there was someone on YouTube, because I like got in my head. I'm like, oh my god, am I doing it? Am I going to enter? Am I going to enter into another Volks lottery? Have I ever entered into a Volks lottery for anything other than clothing? Holy crud! Um, I was watching a YouTube video and the girl was like, "Yeah, I entered in for both, and I thought maybe you could only win one, but I won both of them." And I'm like, "Oh, well, okay."
Mm.
So resellers, almost as dirty as a word as recasters,
Mm-hmm.
will have themselves and their friends and their friends' friends and their friends'
Yeah.
all enter and then try and buy them and then try to sell them at higher
Yeah,
prices.
these girls are going to be highly exclusive.
Yes. So you could enter for 7 lotteries and only win 2. You could enter for 7 lotteries, only win 1 or 0 or all of them.
Yeah.
It all depends on which ones are more exclusive. Now, interesting thing about lotteries on Volks is they never tell you how many they have. So they don't quite know what your odds of winning are.
Yeah, like it's, and like I said before, I didn't know how many that they're going to have, obviously, because they don't tell you. But sometimes when they do lotteries, they usually classify them as one-offs. So then you know that
Yes.
you're there's only that one. So for this particular lottery that's going off, they didn't say one-off in the title or anywhere in the description. So I'm
No.
assuming there's a certain number of each girl that's going to be in this lottery. So,
They
but
have a quantity.
yeah, a quantity, but that quantity I'm assuming is still low, and it's still going to be really hard to get your hands on one of these girls.
Yeah,
And
these lotteries are going to be more akin to the lotteries for Resin because it has that hand painted
the hand
aspect
painted,
to the
yeah.
face, which limits the rate at which they can produce these dolls.
And you can bet your bottom dollar that there are going to be resellers going for this lottery, and you're going to see one or more of these girls show up somewhere like eBay or Macari for like double, triple, maybe even quadruple the price.
Oh, but here's the fun part. It's a Volks USA exclusive. So the first time they did this, they released it in Volks USA, and then people in Japan wanted it,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't want the scalpers going too hard, so they did one little mini release over there.
Yeah.
They haven't done that from the 3 subsequent releases that I recall. So if we have scalpers here, they'll have to somehow circumvent the Volks USA website's ability to only have people purchasing on it. That's the continental USA,
Mm-hmm.
continental
There's a way
America.
around that, and I'm not going to mention that in the stream too. I don't want to give nobody any heads up on how to do that.
Yeah,
But
but like
they might find a way around that in order to still enter the lottery.
right, or North American people aren't exclusive from being resellers. People
Yeah.
here can be resellers too.
Yeah.
So there might be people trying for that.
Which again, I also find very interesting about these dolls is that normally when you have exclusivity when it comes to dolls, I usually see it coming from the Asian side. Like they only sell in Asia or they only sell in Japan, and so you have to get a proxy service in order to get it. This time around, Dolphy Icon is only in the
Mm,
USA.
yeah, the shoes on the other foot.
The shoe's on the other foot for this time around.
My teacher was telling me that like some he's seen some of these dolls go in Japan for twice the price at least,
Mm.
some even triple. So
So
yeah,
I want to show you some close-up pictures just so people can see like a little bit different. So you have the clearer color, which is called pearl, um, is more of like I guess a white or skin tone color, and then you have this darker complexion, which is known as tawny, if I'm not
yes,
mistaken, and
yeah.
then you have lilac, which is the purple, and mint, I think, which is the green skin tone color. What's important to note about these girls is that both the pearl, the mint, and the lavender, they have flakes in the skin to make the skin shimmer and shine. Uh,
Like very, 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 very fine powdery glitter.
yeah.
The kind of stuff that you could like smear on something and it would just make it look metallic. But since they put it in the substrate,
Mm-hmm.
it creates these little sparkly things that everybody on YouTube is like, you can't see this on camera, but it's really cool. I will have to take their word for
Yeah.
it.
The only one that
um,
doesn't get that treatment for whatever weird reason is tawny. Tawny
Now,
is not, as far as I know, she doesn't have any shimmer to her. But I could be wrong. I
I
don't know.
think the reason why they did that was because Tawny was the first actual attempt at uh, at a deeper melanin skin tone beyond a tanned skin
Mm,
for their vinyl, and I think they wanted to open it up to be a little less fantasy. Tawny is the same skin tone that was used for Anthe Himamiya,
mm,
and I think it's about comparable to the Resin Ebony skin tone, which was first released with a elf doll, but I think also actually it might have been first released either with that elf doll or with the SD16 Ruby, which was actually her face sculpt was made to look like an African American woman.
mm.
So I think they did it because they didn't have anything like that yet for a deeper melanin skin tone. And if they didn't want to cut out the collector that was just like, finally, a doll that's the deeper melanin that I want to buy. Oh, why would I want it to be glittery? So, plus
Yeah.
that
So
means all the pieces they made for that they could also use for Anthe Himamiya later.
yeah, so Tara and Aisha from these pictures here won't be having the little glittery kind of shimmer to their skin, but all these other girls will. Oh, and I'm
Okay,
sorry,
so
it's not
which
pearl, it's actually petal is what they call it, petal.
petal? Okay, so which ones are you entering for?
I'm not telling. Come on now. Because I know this is cutthroat, man. These people with their lotteries. The less people going for the ones that I'm looking for, the
Oh,
better my chances, you know?
oh, really? Well, I'll tell everybody this. Nikki and Aisha are new sculpts for this release.
Mm.
Everything else was the other sculpts you saw with the dreaming eyes and the open eyes before.
Yeah,
Those
I
are
think
new sculpts for this
the
release.
only
They will
ones that have
probably
the
be,
dreaming eyes would be this one here, I think. Out of this picture
yeah.
that they're showing. Everybody else has, like, more opened eyes.
Yeah, and with the different releases of these guys, some of them have had different colors have had the dreaming face.
Mm. But I think this is just really, really awesome. Just seeing this combination of resin aesthetics with the vinyl bodies and the internal frame. I think it's really really cool. So good luck, I guess, to everybody that wants to enter into this lottery.
May
Because
the odds ever be in your
yeah,
favor.
it's gonna be crazy. I think, and I think because the joints are color matching now, you're gonna have even more people vying in this
Everybody that
lottery.
was everybody that was holding out,
Yeah,
everybody that was holding out is gonna be diving.
is going to be
And
diving into this one. Yeah, I'm one of them. I didn't bite
mhm.
on the first couple releases because I
I
didn't
didn't
like the
we
color
didn't bite
match.
for neither of us bought for 3 years because we
Yeah.
didn't like the joints. Then they did it.
Now that they color match, people like me and Becca, we're now going to dive into this year's lottery.
No lie,
It's
I was talking
going
with
to
my
be
teacher
crazy.
the day before this release was announced. I was talking with him like, yeah, and like the Dolphy Dream icons were so pretty. I don't know, but I didn't like the joints. I'm thinking about because I like the skin tone and the
Hmm.
yen's so good against the dollar right now for me beneficially. I can like get a a vinyl smart doll in the cocoa because I have a Cortex one, but
Hmm.
I don't like the limitations in the posing from the Cortex. So I'd rather have a vinyl one. And next day, I'm like, we tempted it. We tempted fate. What did we do? This is our fault. Shit.
Well, another thing about these dolls that I want to mention real quick that I think is really interesting is that all of them, all of these icons will have their ears pierced. They're all pre-pierced. So for those of you that are Dolphy Dream collectors or Smart Doll collectors, you know that the ears are never pierced. Usually, if they come with earrings, you have to do the piercing yourself. Which all my dolls I never pierced because I was too scared to do it. It's just me being a fraidy cat, but it is doable. But these girls will all come pre-pierced, and so the earrings that they come with, you'll immediately be able to put on to these girls when you get them. So that's just another interesting tidbit in regards to Dolphy Dream Icon. So again, if you're interested in Icon, this is gonna be one hell of a lottery coming up. And make sure don't bite off more than you can chew, because if you put in multiple lottery entries, be prepared to buy all of them if you win all of them, or risk being banned, or soft banned, or permabanned, whatever it is that they might do.
Whatever methodology they use, so they don't get burned, because it's a bad show to have everybody in a lottery and then like you have to re-lottery those items.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, does everybody go back in? Did somebody win like that could have had it, didn't get it, and then do you just re-pull again from the same pool, or did they spend their money elsewhere once they realized they lost? Bad show.
Definitely. Now, we are running on that 3-hour mark. We've been on for a very long time.
I knew.
So
we warned everybody.
I know. We warned everybody that we were going to be talking a lot. So we're going to move on to our very last section of today's episode, and then we're going to open up to some Q&A after that before we actually close out. So the last section for today's show is going to be Dream Doll. And because we have a very special guest onto the show, it is their choice on what we are going to be Dream Dolling today. And let's see, we're going to change the view here for Dream Doll. And we are going to move on to our next picture, which is Cloud Strife.
There's a reason why my avatar name is Tempest Strife. My doll's name is Tempest Strife, and my man over here, my Volks boy, has some long silver locks. Dude, like Final Fantasy VII was like really cool for me when I was growing up, and it was like the first RPG that I really played through.
Mine too.
And
this is my first real RPG.
Yeah, so like my boy, I have so many figures of him. But when figures started to get a little too expensive, like when they jumped out of that $40-$50 range and started getting to the $80, $90, $300, $500 range.
Yeah.
I'm not even joking now. That Cloud with Fenrir is wild. Like I never could quite bite on it because the Cloud, there was always something like I didn't like the joints on it. The Advent Children one had this little fabric flap that didn't look like the right weight for the scale of the figure. And I really want a Cloud doll. And my husband and I have this understanding that I started to say it once after I got the 2B doll. I'm like, so if they ever made a Cloud Strife doll, he's like, yeah, no, you're getting it. It's fine.
So before we actually get into the different options that we can do here, I just want to address chat real quick because we have some new people coming in. Jay Louisa says, you think Danny would release a 1/4 smart doll? He's working on it. It's called Pocket Doll. But whether or not it actually... Yeah, whether or not it actually fits into a 1/4 scale, I don't know. Because
I feel like it's going to be its own scale.
Yeah, it's going to be smaller.
Which helps him corner the market for the clothing.
Yeah.
And I don't foresee... There's only so much he can do with the staff and the size of the company he wants to maintain for the frames. So if he has this frame and they have to keep it all in stock, they have to keep all the pieces in stock, just like how Milk was chased out by Intergalactic Blue and Interstellar Gray is on the edge of chasing the blue out. There's only so much space.
Right.
So I feel like unless he really changes the scale of which his company works at, I don't foresee any big variations in the sizes of the dolls.
Yeah, but he is working on it on a pseudo 1/4 scale. It's basically just a pocket doll. It's just basically a smaller version. How much smaller we don't know yet. The actual like dimensions. I don't think he ever mentioned exactly how big it was going to be, but he has posted pictures of a prototype next to a regular doll, and it looked like it was a little bit over half the size of a regular doll. But again, these are all prototypes, so we don't know. But he is working on it. When it will come to fruition, we don't know. The only thing we do know is that when he finally does it, it'll be called Smart Doll Mannequin or Pocket Mannequin, where it's just a static figure. It doesn't move. There's no like joints to make it move. At least that's what his initial plans were that he mentioned to us via
Yeah.
Instagram. But maybe at some point that'll change. Who knows?
Because I think he wanted to release that first for the creators so that he could have some people out there creating for the
To
scale
make
of the
clothes,
doll.
yeah, yeah. And then let's see. Jay Louisa says, "Are the joints colored this time for Dolphy Icon?" Yes, they are.
Unfortunately for our wallets, they are.
And Rockio Martinez says, "Aisha is adorable. She is adorable." If we
She
go
when
back
I
real
saw
quick so
her,
everybody else can see, Aisha over here on the bottom, she is adorable.
I'm convinced that she and this girl, which is my Volks Pro Custom Service doll, I think they're the same sculptor. Because they do that and they stay with the company for a long time, and you can kind of start to see like, oh, they make their lips like this or their eyes like this. The roundness of her eyes and the
hmm
kind of bigger pouty upper lip and things, I feel like it might be the same sculptor. And there used to be, I don't know if there is anymore, like websites that say, oh, these dolls by Volks were sculpted by this sculptor and this
hmm
sculptor and stuff like that. So I'm wondering
It might
if
be
it's
in
the
there because
same
if you go to
sculptor.
the Volks website, the USA website, I think they do say the different sculptors that were
Yeah.
involved in the
So,
project, so you might find it there.
so Aisha almost looks like she could be her bigger sister, or maybe a mom, really cutely.
And then Sandrine Laplace says hello. Thank you, Sandrine, for dropping by. I believe you just kind of you just showed up to the stream, so welcome, welcome. Uh, FF is great reservoir for dolls. It can be. There's a lot of characters in Final Fantasy that I would love to see in doll form. Oh my
Oh yeah,
god!
we could.
Don't even get me started because I'll just start rattling off names like crazy.
Oh yeah, we could run that Mako reactor dry.
Yeah, yeah. So going back to Dream Doll, so we are going to be talking about Cloud Strife, and there are two particular head sculpts that Becca thinks would make a really good base heads to make a cloud. So the first up that she's going to address for us is going to be this one here from Ram Cube, I believe is the company, right?
Yeah, so this is a smaller artist atelier that only releases like one or two head sculpts at a time, and like only paints a few of them in a few different ways, which is really fun. At first, I came across them because I was just going mad because I was like, I want to do this Beyond the Doll Dream Doll segment, and I want to look for a spare head because I think it would be cool as heck to put it on the Smart Doll boy body because they made it quite muscular, especially in version 2.
Mm-hmm.
Also because at 1/3 scale, if you're holding a blade, the stability of the internal frame is what you would need for Cloud to hold that big sword.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to work that well with a vinyl, with a resin doll, unless you have a very few specific locking mechanisms in those
Mm-hmm.
joints. So I'm like, I want to find one I can hybrid, which means I want to find a loose head because it's like the most probable. I thought this one was cool because it has the feeling of the old full motion video Cloud Strife from the original game. So it has that very anime nose,
Mm-hmm.
thin lips, um, angular eyes, which I thought would look really great. And you could even do like an anime eye with that. And this is an anime style face up. This was one of two face ups. So I felt like it would work really well. It had the more angular, pointed face, which I thought would work
Yeah, I
great.
like the eyes definitely. I think the eyes is a big selling point for Cloud. It kind of looks just like the picture that's here in a way. It almost
Yeah,
looks
and
the same.
that's even an
Oops.
anime version versus the real remake version, real semi real.
And then we have another doll that you think could be a good base, and we're going to show that picture here.
So this was from Ring Doll, I believe it was.
Yeah, this one's Ring Doll.
So that they have this wonderful guy, and their face in this case, I was like going through all these faces, and a lot of them have that like Korean pop star look,
Hmm.
which was like a little too baby faced for Cloud. So I was looking for this long angular nose, some more pursed lips,
Mm-hmm.
and brows that look like they could carry that serious look that is quintessential for this poster for the remake. And I felt like I really found it in him. Unfortunately, he's only sold full set.
Mm.
However, um, as proven by all the random heads I've brought over here, doll land is the, especially resins where you can sometimes get extra heads with, if you're buying during a holiday and they throw a head in if you
Mm-hmm.
spent over $800. It's the land of floating heads. Odds are this guy comes with that really cool robot arm. Someone
Yeah,
wants that
I
body.
was looking at that. I was like that, I was like prosthetic arm or robot arm, cyborg arm, whatever you want to call it. It looks really cool.
Somebody wants that body. So if you want that head, there is someone that's going to want that body.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to price it right so that you and the other person are making out okay. So you could end up with that floating head to put on your lovely smart doll chaos assembled body. Um, and they could run away happy with their freaking awesome cyborg man body. And everybody will end up happy. And you could put it on your fancy locking mechanism or rubber bands or wish dreams. Perhaps mix up your two-part silicone mold putty to put on the top of that thing to make a little peg to hold that head in place. You'll be golden. Um, and I think it would work really well. Definitely.
Yeah, I think both of these heads look pretty good. I could foresee a cloud being on either one of these heads. It could
Yeah,
work.
yeah. The one I feel is really good for the remake version. I feel like the other one's really good for the OG full motion video version.
And then I actually have two choices if you were to go the vinyl route, because remember these are resin heads that Becca has pointed out for us. So if you want to go like the vinyl route, there isn't as many choices, unfortunately, for vinyl as there is with resin. As Becca just said, like resin, there's just a plethora of floating heads.
And I listed all those companies. Meanwhile, it's like Shizusan is like, okay, we're gonna have our news today from these three companies.
Yeah,
That's all you don't have that much more in the one third market.
yeah. There's not
Angel,
much.
maybe Angelphilia, but that's a whole other aesthetic.
So with vinyl, I have these two. So you obviously have from Smart Doll Land, you got AG here, which is one of three, I guess, sculpts that came out of Smart Doll for guys. Four if you include the one that was actually a, I forgot which girl sculpt head it was, but they made it
Genesis,
into
I
a
think it was
boy.
the Genesis.
Genesis, and they made it into a boy.
It looked good.
But yeah, I mean, there's not many choices in Smart Doll Land unless you convert a female head, or one that has been, I guess, previously used as a female head to make into a male head. And then for Dolphy Dream, I actually think this new one here, which is the DDH-26 head, would look really nice as a cloud. Especially those eyes, especially if you're gonna do like a angry cloud kind of look or aggressive cloud. Like I
Yeah.
feel like this would definitely fit the bill for that. But again, there isn't too many choices in Vinyl Land to choose from.
Between the two, I feel like once again, Volks has the chubby cheeks. I feel like Cloud doesn't have them chubby
That is
cheeks.
true. Yes.
I'm leaning towards the smart doll, which would almost be one complete smart doll in a way, which, if they ever re-released it, I could do a repaint, just a wholesale repaint, or maybe even just replace the eyes for
Mm.
something Mako infused. Um, and it might work out pretty darn well. But yeah, it looks pretty good. The nice slimmer cheeks,
Hmm.
angular eyes, the nose, anime style. Um, I feel like that would work very well. Obviously, the smart doll body. I think that might have been the version one body, but
It
there was
is.
definitely a
Yeah.
slightly the next version of the body was very muscular.
Yeah. This is the
Um,
original male body, so it's not as muscular toned.
yeah. Now keep in mind, whichever face you have, you also have to have him in the wall market dress. So you have to have it be able to go both ways.
The oh my god, I think, what is it?
They're
They're
releasing a $200 figure
yeah,
on
they're
Square
releasing
Enix.
one on Square
It's
Enix.
a $200 static figure. It's hard for me to bite on a $200 figure that's not jointed. But yeah, they're releasing a $200 static figure on the Square Enix website, and I'm just like, can't, can't. It doesn't. It's not a dolly. I can't.
It's not a dolly.
Mm, I can't. If static figures, it's like and then you're collecting dust in all these nooks and crannies that are sculpted, and then like you got to display it somewhere, and I just.
Just for funsies, real quick, I just want to.
Yep. Yeah.
If you want a Cloud in a dress, you can go
Oh
to
yeah.
Square Enix and get Cloud
And I
in a
mean,
dress.
hey, if you did the smart doll, you could probably just swap out the bust and it would work
You
really
don't even
great.
have to, because it looks like even in the statue he has a bit of a bust.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you could probably buy a standard medium
Oh
bust
yeah, like
or
a
a
standard
secondhand
bust,
medium
yeah.
bust just to use for when you dress
I think.
dress him up for his wall market stint.
Yeah, I think that
Uh,
would be really really funny.
Sandrine Laplace has said she loves they love, I should say, uh, the head from Ram Cube for Cloud. Yeah, it's really neat. There's a
Yeah.
lot of anime style heads in a greater variety in some ways from the resin companies. Um, but so there's 2D Doll. There's a few other companies that do anime style
Mm.
heads, but in resin, and there's becoming more of them. Um, they also said I can imagine Squall from Final Fantasy VIII on the DDH 26.
I can see that. I can see that. But still,
I
it runs into that realm that you were talking about before, about the more rounder cheeks versus
the chubby
elongated
cheek,
face. Yeah,
the chubby
it's
cheek.
just
I
very
feel like
famous for Volks with their chubbier cheeks.
I definitely feel like the DDH 26 right here with the school uniform outfit and then the short brown hair is already kind of part way into Squall outfit. So I think that's definitely helping our brains get there.
Yeah, it's just being able to envision it.
Oh yeah.
But that's everything for Dream Doll. What do you guys think? I know some of you already voiced your opinions in chat that's watching live, but if you're watching this at a later date, put it down in the comment section down below. Which ones do you think are your picks, or do you have your own picks of what you could use as a base doll head? Put it down in the comment section so that we can share it with everybody and get a discussion going down there.
Either resin or vinyl.
Resin or vinyl,
Anything.
yeah, anything.
Anything goes. Thank you to the 13 people that stayed up or woke up from different uh, area codes. Area codes.
Different
This is bigger than
time
area
zones.
codes. Yeah, different country codes.
Yeah, we have a I don't want to say long-standing history because we're only on episode 7, but since the inception of this show, we have been running a little longer and longer every episode.
Um, that's that's just normal for you.
That's normal for me, but
That's just that's
people
how your shows happen.
people that are new to my channel may not be used to it. That I love to talk a lot and ramble a lot, and it just so happens that my very lovely guest Becca here is just like me. So we have a very long
Just what
episode
I
today
do.
because we love to talk
And there's so much talk, and I like. I feel like I scratched the surface. There's so
oh,
much
definitely.
history and science and
There's definitely
posing.
way more that we could talk about
And
about resin and vinyls, which leads me into my next point that I wanted to make, was that we haven't seen the last of Becca on this channel. I'm pretty sure we will have you back again to address more topics in the future.
oh
Um,
yeah,
but
oh yeah.
we can carry a conversation, like even
Oh,
without streaming. Just Becca and I have hung out, talking for long periods of times about dolls. So
oh
this
yeah.
is no different for us.
I mean, we could do something crazy, and if we both get really damn lucky, we could have a co-opening stream.
We could.
Just go for it.
But yeah, for the people that have been here since the beginning, thank you for staying and watching this show. It's a very long, informative show. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Found it a lot of fun. If you're watching this at a later date on the VODs on the YouTube channel, I hope you enjoyed it. And at least for you, you could watch it in piecemeal. I have been throwing around the idea since I've been doing this show, because they're usually long, of doing like normally when people do streams, like especially for video gaming, they do like a clips channel. Or I don't want to make a whole separate channel, but I'll probably do a playlist on my channel for like short clips of like really interesting parts. I may think about doing that in the future. I don't know yet. It's just a lot more extra work on my end to
It's
do.
labor intensive. I think go easier on yourself if you're going to do anything. Just
Yeah.
create timestamps in the video, and you can just make it in the link.
Yeah.
Just create timestamps. It's fine.
We'll
Don't
see.
make separate
We'll
videos.
see how it goes. But yeah, well, definitely. If you're watching this at a later date, it's easier for you to just watch it in piecemeal. But thank you everybody for watching. But before we go, I do want to do a special game with Becca
Ooh,
here.
yes.
I did it with Keith, and I want to do it with all my guests. It's just a little funsy games. It's basically a game where I'm gonna throw out a couple terms at you, and you got to tell me the very first thing that comes to your head in regards to that terms. It'll be 3 doll terms or doll related terms, and 2 just random terms from wherever I just feel like pulling terms out of. The goal of this is just to answer it as quickly as possible, first thing that pops into your head. And I will do at the end of the season or the end of the year, I'll do like a poll where everybody can vote. And the winner that had the best answers or funniest answers or whatever, whoever wins, I will have a little prize for that guest. So whenever you're ready, Becca. Oh my God, for some reason my eyes are like tearing. I don't know why.
It's been a while.
Oh my gosh, maybe it's like
sure both of us
staring into the screen and having these lights like all coming down on my face for studio lighting is just like getting to my eyes now.
Also, I'm sure both of us have been being good and hydrating, but not necessarily doing the second portion of that function.
Yeah.
So I determined that Melfina shall help me.
Alrighty. We don't have a timer. I haven't got a timer. We're just gonna shoot them off and just go with the flow. So are you ready?
Ready to flow.
Okay. So here we go. I'm just gonna say the first word, and then we're just gonna go from there. So first word. Well, I guess it's 2 words, but like it's a thing. Doll stands.
Necessary.
Pringles.
Pop.
Resin.
Heavy.
Ooh, meat. Like meat that you eat. Meat.
Niku.
Ooh. And then lastly, elastics.
Fantastic.
Elastics, fantastics. Ooh, okay. That was pretty funny. Oh my goodness. Thank you for participating in my little game. At the end of the year or end of the season, I will compile everybody's answers all together in like a mini video, and I'll have everybody vote. And like I said, we're going to have like a little gift for the guest that wins the little game prize. It's like a little game prize. Nothing that big. It's just something fun for participating as a guest. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to appear and give all your knowledge about resin dolls. Well, as much as you could fit in 3 hours, rather.
I know. If you want to know more about resin dolls, I do in fact have a podcast on, I think it's on Google Play and one other place, and iTunes, called Ningyo Bingo, Ningyo Bingo, that as Jay Louise mentioned, I have with my co-host Lindsay. It's been more or less on hiatus, but I've been keeping it extant and hosted. And so it's a wonderful plethora of knowledge. And I know ball jointed dolls and dolls in general are a very visual medium, but I wanted to talk about the aspects of it that were a little less visual. So it's a great thing if you have any travels, work, you need to do math problems, and you can listen to people talk while doing that. If you need to have something less visual, if you want to craft cosplay, etc., you just want to listen to it, it's great for that because no visual component required. You can just listen.
Mm.
And I think I got up to, including extra episodes and con reviews and stuff, it was almost 30 episodes. Each of them around an hour each at minimum. So plenty of content for you to learn.
Thank you for that, and definitely check out her podcast. It's really good, actually. And I think we have an episode on there with another interview of you and me, actually, on the
Yes.
podcast.
If you, we can listen to it at another, maybe I'll listen tomorrow and go down a memory lane. I also have an interview with Danny Chu prior to Cortex releasing.
That's right.
Which was very fascinating as well.
That's right. I was actually there when you interviewed him for that one. That was Anime NYC 2017, I think it was.
Yeah, not my best audio in the world, but you can tell what he's saying, and it was a very fascinating conversation.
Oh, forget that. I mean, audio is just a mess for anybody that's trying to do something at a con. Like, there's just loud noises everywhere. So it's not just you. All my recordings from any con I've been to have always been really, like, noisy and, like, congested with stuff. But yeah, find her on her podcast, Ningo Bingo, and then also on her Instagram or Twitter. That's on the bottom of her picture there. You can find all of her pictures and posts on those areas. Again, thank you for coming to the show. Last minute questions, if anyone has any questions, either for myself or for Becca before we end the stream, as it's a 3.5 hour stream. But we may have questions. Anybody, before we go?
Let's wait a little bit because there's the lag.
Yeah, I know Honecha, which I guess you're new, because I didn't see your name come out before, unless this is your first time commenting and you've been here the whole time. But they say Doll Zone made the animatic resins of Halo and Strayer. Really? There's Halo figures? I mean, Halo dolls?
Animatic resin.
Animatic resin.
What an animatic resin is.
Maybe they just mean figure? Maybe an animatic resin's like a resin figure?
Maybe.
I'm not really sure.
Maybe it's the same artist and sculpting group.
If you can clarify in Honecha.
We're gonna have some Google searching to do later.
Yeah. For Halo and Strayer. Any other questions? It looks like we still have 10 people watching.
I know.
According to YouTube, but if none, we're gonna give it a few seconds. But if none, we are going to end it in a bit.
Very good.
No.
I think our audio has caught up with our video here.
Yeah, it's so like on a delay
good.
for I think 10 seconds or something like that.
Very good.
All right, so no questions. So thank you, Becca, for coming and enlightening us for resin dolls and where to buy them, any kind of quick tips on maintaining what they actually are, and just your overall, infatuation with resins. Quick tips going into vinyl, being a vinyl collector for both. Again, we'll try to have you back again for more topics. Probably for more resin topics, since we only just scratched the surface.
Oh my god. I know you wanted to order a resin doll from Volks in Japan, and we could talk about that. I
did. They turned me down because I wasn't a Japanese resident.
Yeah, we can have a whole episode on that because I host Neo Angel Den on the Ningyo Bingo website, which is currently one of the most full but not completely updated websites with all of the head sculpts for that. So I could have a conversation about that and maybe be inspired to update it again.
Ooh, we might do that. If chat wants to see it, maybe we'll do a what's it called? A full choice system Japan edition for resin dolls.
Oh yeah.
So
anyway.
Yeah, Jay Louisa says, good night. Thank you for coming, Jay Louisa. Sandrine Laplace, thank you. I'm glad I was able to be there for the last 30 minutes. I'll watch the rest later. Yeah, of course. It's going to be up on YouTube for you to watch anyway, so definitely check that out. But thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for participating in our very long stream. I think the longest stream I've had to date for Beyond the Doll.
We knew this.
we
knew this coming into it. Look, I came with a monster energy. I'm dude. I knew.
Thank you, Becca, for coming. We will probably see you again, like I said, at a later date. And bye, everybody watching. And we will see you guys in the next episode in 2 weeks from now for Beyond the Doll, which we have slated for another guest that's going to be talking about face-ups. So be prepared for that episode in 2 weeks. So where is Kano here? So Kano wants to say goodbye. Bye. I can't, because the camera's flipped. I can't get her to stand straight. Bye, everybody. Take care. We'll see you in 2 weeks. See ya.